I'm Councillor Gerard Hargreaves, the Mayor, and this meeting is being held in accordance with government regulations on holding virtual meetings. So please bear with us if we run into any technological challenges during the meeting. And at the outset, I would ask that councillors only unmute their microphones when they are addressing the meeting. And likewise, to save bandwidth, I would ask that councillors only switch on their cameras when speaking and remember to switch them off after they have spoken. If a councillor wishes to speak on a particular item and has not been called to speak, please indicate by typing the letter Q in the conversation column or by drawing my attention by speaking up. Please do not use a conversation column for other comments, as they can be seen by all participants and retained as part of the meeting. And to assist your fellow councillors and officers and members of the public watching online to identify you, please state your name before you speak. You should also indicate if you need to leave the meeting at any point. As is customary at our meetings, we remember that in June 2017, 72 of our residents tragically lost their lives in the Grenfell Tower fire. I ask every member of the council to pay our deepest and continuing respect in the conventional manner by marking the moment with 72 seconds silence now. Thank you. And at this time, I'm sure that I speak for the whole council in expressing our sincerest condolences to each and every member of our Kensington and Chelsea community who have lost lives and family members, neighbours, friends or colleagues to this coronavirus pandemic. The minutes of the ordinary meeting of the council held on the 27th of January have been circulated. I shall take these as read and confirm them as a correct record, unless anyone has a point of accuracy to raise. Thank you. I shall now ask the Chief Executive to report any apologies for absence or lateness from this virtual meeting. Chief Executive? There are no apologies. Thank you very much. I shall now read out a list of members to ascertain attendance at the meeting. Members are reminded that for the meeting to be quorate, we must have at least 13 councillors present at all times. In order to manage the roll call swiftly as possible, please remember just to switch on your microphone and answer here when your name is called, and switch off your microphone as soon as you have answered. Councillor Addenbrooke.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Dorian.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ali.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Aretti.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Atkinson.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bakhtiar.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Beryl Cox.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Blakeman.
Present.
Councillor Campbell.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Chown.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Siren.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dent Code.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nagy.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Evans.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Folkes.
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Freeman,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hammond,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Healy,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Henderson, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Husband,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Idris, Councillor Idris, Councillor Jackson,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Kamali,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lowry,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lindsay,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Marshall,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mason,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McVeigh,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mills,
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nile,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor O'Connor,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Palmer,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pascal,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Press,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Rendell,
Here.
Councillor Rossi,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Round,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Schmetterling,
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Spalding,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Taylor Smith,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thalcitis,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thaxter,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wade,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wason,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wheel,
Here, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Will,
Good evening, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Williams,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Woodger.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I think all councillors present have now been called. Please let me know if your name has not been called.
Councillor Bennett, also here, Mr. Mayor. My microphone wasn't working earlier.
Thank you. I would advise councillors that they are present in a meeting and so they should observe the rules of the behaviour set out in the Members' Code of Conduct. Councillors are also reminded to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest in any matter before the council this evening and to leave the meeting before such a matter is considered. Are there any such declarations? With regard to the report on the annual review of councillors' allowances, all members are advised to declare an interest, and in order to manage this with the minimum of disruption, all members attending this meeting will therefore be deemed as having declared a personal interest in this item, unless a member objects. And this fact will be duly noted and recorded in the minutes. Is that agreed? Thank you.
Agreed by me.
Does any member wish to make a declaration pursuant to section 106 of the Local Governments Finance Act, which relates to members' council tax payment and the ability of members to vote on matters relating to the level or calculation of council tax or the arrangement for administering council tax? Thank you. So we now move to item 4, public contributions. As it is the budget meeting, and obviously today is budget day all round, so this is a budget meeting also for Kensington and Chelsea. This evening we'll be devoting, we will be devoting up to half an hour for public contributions. These contributions were invited via the council's website. The submissions will be read and then the lead member will respond. The spokesperson for the minority party will also be given the opportunity to respond. So we now have our first question from Mr. Kush Kanodia, and Kush, I think you're here to read your question yourself.
That's correct.
Thank you. Would you like to read your question?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. The last time I presented here was in 2019 when Chelsea Westminster Hospital planned to charge for disabled parking. After my campaign, we managed to abolish all disabled car parking charges from 206 NHS England hospitals, helping 2.5 million disabled people to access critical healthcare in the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown. After meeting RBKC's parking team, in September 2020, we created hospital wards around Chelsea Westminster Royal Brompton, Royal Marsden and St Charles NHS hospitals, expanding free disabled parking from 1 hour to 4 hours. Thank you now for reviewing the implementation of this across the borough. Today, as a representative of the local charity Action for Disability Kensington and Chelsea, I wanted to raise the matter of the ULEZ expansion from October 2021, where the Mayor of London and TfL have failed to provide the same reasonable adjustments for disabled people as the congestion charging zone. Recently, a High Court judge ruled that the Mayor of London and TfL streetscape initiatives as unlawful. The judge noted that the needs of people with protected characteristics, including the elderly and the disabled, were not considered and highlighted the inadequacies of their equality impact assessment. Will RBKC confirm that they will raise the matter with the coalition of the willing at the High Court if the Mayor of London and TfL continue to fail in their legal duty under the public sector equality duty of the Equalities Act to make reasonable adjustments for disabled people as they are required to do so by UK law? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And I ask Councillor Balcetis, are you going to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kush, for coming tonight and raising this very important issue. I'm afraid to say that we've seen before that TfL often fail to listen to local residents and businesses and have failed to take account here, I think, of Action Disability's concerns. Kush is right to raise the issue. The ULEZ is being rolled out to the extended area without consideration made for residents with disabilities or blue badge holders. And I have written to TfL to ask for a ULEZ exemption for blue badge holders following conversations with Action Disability over the past couple of months. TfL currently applies a blue badge exemption to the congestion charge, but has not provided the same for ULEZ. And I think this is particularly important as many residents with mobility issues rely on lifts from family and friends who may live outside the expanded ULEZ area. These groups could be hit with unreasonable fines for trying to help somebody in need and may not be able to provide lifts as easily in the future. I am concerned about TfL's regard for the Equalities Act and EIA assessments. I don't think that this has all been ironed out. There's clearly work to do, and I think this ought to be reconsidered. We will certainly continue to work with Action Disability and other local groups. I know this has come up at the Council's Mobility Forum to represent your interests the best that we can.
Thank you. Who would like to respond from the Labour group?
I will, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree entirely with you, Mr. Kennedy, that it's an absolute disgrace that people with disabilities in 2021 are treated like second-class citizens. And congratulations on your brilliant campaign to stop disabled people being charged parking charges when visiting hospital. That was an absolutely brilliant campaign, and well done for that. It is slightly different with this particular campaign. When Labour lost the London mayoralty in 2008, there was a fully costed plan to make numerous stations step-free, including Ladbroke Grove and several of them in North Kensington, which have very, very high steps. Where their platforms are set very high. The mayor at the time committed to pursue the plans. He then deferred them, and then he cancelled them altogether.
Councillor Denko, can you confine your answer to the question on ULEZ, please?
I am talking about Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
I thought you were talking about step-free access.
I am talking about step-free access, which is also mentioned in here. Thank you. There was a great deal of money which has been wasted on Routemasters Garden Bridge and so on. The previous mayor wasted £1 billion, nearly £1 billion, on projects which could have enabled the access for people with disabilities to travel far more freely. Everybody should have equal access, and this is a history, Mr. Canodia. It is not just this past for years. There is a history of ignoring people with disabilities and treating them like second-class citizens. I do agree with you that the ULEZ, which I understand will be there is a dispensation for disabled people who own cars to use it, but not for people who will be driving people around. I perfectly understand that, and that is something which I'm sure we'd support you in trying to persuade TfL to recognise that. But there is a long history of, as I say, of people with disabilities being treated like second-class citizens and money being thrown away, nearly £1 billion with the previous mayor being spent on many of them absolutely nonsense projects. People with disabilities have a perfect right to workshop.
Councillor Dinko, that's your 2 minutes. Thank you.
Living life, and we would certainly support that and contact TfL to reconsider that. Thank you.
No mention of ULEZ then.
And thank you very much, Kush, for your question. Thank you very much. Can we now move to Mr. Lloyd North, who has a question? Would you like to read your question, Mr. Lloyd North?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. My name is Lloyd North. I chair the ESSA Mansion Blocks Group, which represents 26 estates and mansion blocks on or close to the High Street. We very much welcome the council's consideration for cycle projects in the borough. Our members have given considerable feedback to this, and they say that they do not support the cycleway as it was in its form last year. We trust that councillors will hear our voices of local people and not to allow that cycleway to return. However, we are happy to consult in other ways that we can improve safety for cyclists in the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, are you going to respond to this?
Yes, please. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for addressing the council meeting this evening. And actually, thank you to you and your members for the feedback that was provided by the ESSA Mansion Blocks Group at the end of last year on the temporary cycle lane. Can I just take this opportunity to just widen a bit and thank all residents and businesses and groups who have engaged with us while the scheme was in its early stages. And as you all know, putting communities first is one of our core values. And so therefore we welcome discussions which shape our proposed schemes so they can work for everybody in the borough. This is a council that really wants to listen. But as you will also know, there are very strong views on both sides of this debate, which is why the leadership team, with the exception of Councillor Johnny Thalasites, will be considering a revised report at our leadership team meeting on the 17th of March. We are, however, also, of course, always looking to improve road safety for pedestrians and for cyclists, especially at busy junctions. And so, subject to the outcome of local consultation, you'll see that we have planned several such improvements for this year. So thank you again. Thank you for coming. Thank you for speaking. And we certainly do look forward to engaging with you on future projects.
Thank you. Who wishes to respond from the Labour Group?
Me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. North, for the question and the comments. We agree that there are strong views on both sides, and we again agree that we need to listen to our residents, and inclusion and proper consultation is the key for any decision taken by the council and the councillors. However, we need to remember that High Street Kensington is linking Hammersmith and Westminster. It's a major road in Kensington. Again, like Holland Park Avenue, linking Hammersmith, Shepherd's Bush roundabout to Marble Arch. These roads are very difficult. We need to also remember that we are part of London. We can't say this is our own always. We can't say this is our borough. We take our decisions regardless of other people's interests. We have another speaker who is raising a very serious question about the same topic, which is very important. So while we agree and support that we need to listen to our residents and listen to their concerns, we need to remember that we are part of the bigger picture. We are a member for a bigger London community, and we have a duty to care for others as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. North, for raising your question with us this evening. Thank you. We now move on to the third question by Kate Greenwood. I shall read out this question. Mr. Mayor, in reviewing the decision to remove the cycle lane on Kensington High Street, I asked the leadership team to consider the effect on businesses such as electricians, plumbers, and others providing useful services to residents. They must use vehicles to do their jobs. The congestion caused by the cycle lane must have hurt these businesses, as they found travelling time increase. I hope the Council takes into account the needs of this important group in making their decision. Councillor Folkes, are you going to answer this one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms Greenwood, for bringing the question to Council tonight. I just wanted to confirm what Councillor Campbell just said, that absolutely no decision on the High Street Kensington cycle lane has been made at this point. And the decision that we will be making on the 17th of March will be taken on the basis of community sentiment, evidence, and a data-led approach. And local businesses' sentiment, of course, feeds into this, including electricians and plumbers, and all the other businesses that need to use vehicles for their jobs. So absolutely, that will be factored into the decision-making process. And I want to say that I understand that COVID has been incredibly difficult for businesses, and therefore it's really important that we can look as a council for every way that we can support them in reopening and recovering. So thank you very much for your question, and I hope you also look at my answer to the following question, which is on a similar topic and explores the subject a bit further. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wishes to respond from the Labour Group?
Me, Mr. Mayor, again.
Councillor Bactial, thank you.
Thank you. This question again related to the previous one, and we need to remember that Kensington and Chelsea, especially Kensington and North Kensington, is one of the most polluted areas in London, boroughs in London. And we are working together, Mayor of London and with our communities, we are trying to minimize the damage and the effect of the air pollution in the borough. And one of the ways is to encourage our residents and others to use bicycles and rely less on transport, on vehicles. So it's, again, a very difficult situation. How could you please both sides? Again, we are under an obligation to try to do our best for our communities. And again, remembering that we are part of the wider picture of London. So we have to contribute and to have to minimize the damage of the air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you. And the fourth question really along the same lines from Ellie Lines. As a local business owner myself, I know that local businesses have suffered enough. Does the council agree local businesses do not need the addition of more cycle lanes like Kensington High Street, which discouraged customers? Councillor Folkes, do you want to say anything more on this?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Ms Lines, for this question. Obviously, I hope you will see the points that we've already made before from Councillor Campbell and myself. And again, I want to acknowledge that you're absolutely right. Businesses really have suffered through this very difficult period of COVID, and therefore the council must consider all the levers that we have in our power to help support your recovery. But I think it's important to note that cycle lanes on high streets can actually work in tangent with local businesses and encourage customers. Living Street data has shown that active travellers to a high street on average spend more time on the high street than those that drive. So this is certainly something that when we are looking forward and consulting with our businesses and our residents, that should not just be excluded per se. It is one of the many factors that should be taken into account. Pragmatic solutions don't just want to discourage pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, or hinder businesses. And this is why we've all been saying it's a very complex pool of people that need to be considered, and they're a pool that we will consider all of them. It's essential that businesses are included in this conversation for future high streets and our decision making. And we're currently working really closely with the Kensington Business Forum on a bid proposal, which so far has had the support from 90 businesses approached on the high street. And the bid will help us understand what customers need, what businesses need, what their future concerns are, and what the challenges for our high streets will face when they open. And if adopted, the bid will give Kensington High Street businesses a powerful vehicle through which to shape and redefine their priorities.
Thank you. Councillor Phillips, who wishes to respond from the Labour group?
I will, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor
Mr.
Lawrence.
Mayor, let the polls speak for themselves. A significant poll released today by ICM involving phone interviews with 1,000 residents across the borough found that 56% of our residents support the cycle lane project in High Street, Kensington, with fewer than 30% opposed. What can we deduce from this? Firstly, the council leadership was misleading at best and at worst telling us an untruth when they alleged that the majority of residents opposed the lane. Secondly, it shows that the leadership team is at odds with the majority of our residents who they are supposed to be representing. Mr. Mayor, the Labour group supports evidence-based policy and so do our residents. We mustn't let members of the Conservative Association insinuate that the cycle lanes were harmful to business. We question the business acumen of this council's leadership. The leadership team is wasting £700,000 of public money, including a £314k grant from TfL, to remove a temporary lane only 7 weeks after it was installed. Has this grant been returned? There is in fact no evidence that the cycle lane discouraged customers to shops. That is an untruth. The consultation which this council used was conducted over the November lockdown, a time when all non-essential shops and retail were closed. Therefore, the notion that the cycle lane was preventing customers from accessing our closed shops is an absurdity, simply fake news of the highest degree. Tonight is an opportunity for the council to demonstrate by voting for our Labour budget that it cares about the fact that our borough has the 4th worst air pollution in the country, and we need to do something to improve our environment and the safety of our infrastructure at the same time. To conclude, Mr. Mayor, the Labour opposition on this council stands with the Mayor of London. This is why, as the polls show, members of the public, including the majority of business people, support him and his plans for a permanent cycle route on our high street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all the residents for the questions this evening. Thank you. So we now move to item number 5, petitions. Do members have any petitions to present? No, thank you very much. We now move to the address by the Leader and the Leader of the Minority Party. I call upon the Leader to address the meeting and Councillor Mason to respond. Councillor Campbell, you have up to 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, this afternoon we heard about the state of the nation's finances, and tonight we're going to hear about the state of the council's finances. And across both, the challenges are clear but ever more complex. The pandemic that arrived on these shores 12 months ago has left many struggling in its wake. People have lost loved ones, lost jobs, lost income, and suffered long-term health impacts, either from COVID or from the long, hard months of lockdown. Now, the council set out a clear roadmap for the country to emerge from this crisis, and exactly what we're going to do this evening, as we set out a fair and balanced budget, a budget of support, a budget that shows we care, a budget that only takes what we need and gives back to the people that really needs it. If we agree our budget tonight, our council tax will remain at one of the lowest rates in the country. This is a £630 million plan to get the borough back on its feet and ring-fence the most important issues: Grenfell recovery, better housing, safer and cleaner streets. My colleague, Councillor Wheel, will outline the details later, but I just want to say from the outset, no matter what, the council has protected the £50 million Grenfell Recovery Fund. It's for people that really need it. We made a commitment and we will always remain true to that commitment. Mr. Mayor, on top of that, we'll invest £227 million in a huge 3-year programme, the largest this council has ever seen. Spending on roads for users and pedestrians, improving homes and building homes, and boosting the economy. To make this a reality, council tax and funding for adult social care will rise by just over 10p a day. The council will continue to offer the maximum local council tax relief for the 13,000 residents on lowest income. Mr. Mayor, I've seen the budget proposals from the opposition group. They talk about cutting, they talk about savings, they talk frankly like George Osborne did a decade ago. Unable to change the record, they have not accounted for a pandemic that has engulfed us all. They propose to not increase spending on adult social care, just as our care homes are recovering from the worst 12 months in the history of the sector. They talk about cutting communications and engagement, just as our communities need it the most to access vital services, vaccine testing and support. And they want to cut contingency planning, not even 4 years after the tragedy at Grenfell Tower. Mr. Mayor, what's more, the Labour group only tinker around the edges. They have proposals worth thousands designed to catch headlines or a few likes on Twitter. We have proposals worth millions that will deliver services and catch those that could fall in the coming months, including an £8 million COVID recovery fund to help families, business owners, children, the elderly, the most vulnerable. Mr. Mayor, I encourage everyone in this council to support the budget that Mary sets out this evening. Balanced, fair, and for everyone. Mr. Mayor, my remarks this evening are financial in nature, but I also want to reiterate that it is people who matter, not spreadsheets. I want to repeat what I said on Friday with the release of the Kroll report, which can be found on our website. It is a call to action, a reminder. We must continue to accelerate change. We must put social value first. We must do what is right for the people of this borough, all of our communities, all of the time. As I said on Friday, what a report cannot do is convey the depth of feeling and mistrust that still exists between the council and part of our communities today. We accept that. Grenfell happened nearly 4 years ago, but it is still raw. In a few weeks, staff and councillors from this authority will face questions at the ongoing public inquiry. And I remind all those who are giving evidence at the inquiry that we owe it to those who lost their lives, those who survived and their families, to be honest with them and to be honest with ourselves. When I took this job as leader, I made a commitment that I would be honest, telling it how it is, the whole unvarnished truth. It is my belief that our budget this evening is also true to that commitment. We haven't hidden from the challenges. We set them out clearly and plainly and set out the proposals to tackle them. And we must tackle them together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Mason, you have up to 5 minutes to speak, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is my 30th budget, Mr. Mayor, and I have to say that the record never seems to change. The council talks about change, but the record never seems to change. And Councillor Campbell, who I hoped I got on well with and cordially, has taught me over the years that sort of thinking tells me that the councillor or the lead member doesn't understand the mechanics of the budget they are talking about. And that has been a big problem on this council over the years with procurement, with budgets. And I was a scrutiny chair for 5 years, and I've done 30 on this council. And we have got into the problems we have got into in many areas because the people who are meant to be putting together and speaking about budgets or procurement or any other issue like that simply fail to understand the mechanics of what they're talking about, and therefore they come out with statements like the leader has. I had the same thing when I had executive members sitting in front of me on the procurement table. They didn't understand, and the last leadership of this council before 2018 didn't understand how procurement worked, and we lost millions because of that. And the Grenfell public inquiry will at some point pronounce on whether this council understood the areas that the inquiry is looking at, and some horrible stuff is coming out of that as well. We in the Labour group support some of the good things, of course, in the majority party budget, not least the homes programme, the 240 million homes programme. But we support a budget that is supplemented by the things that are in the amendments that are in our budget, which speaks to the need and the wishes and some of the failures and some of the things we think should be improved. And it's all affordable because it's, of course, balanced by the same officers. And we believe that it will speak to the residents both north and south more fairly. So. And we will debate the budget later on. I'm not going to debate it now, but I think that we have a real problem if we're talking about change. And I've said this again and again, Mr. Mayor, since the public inquiry began. I said that if the members of this council who will be here long after people like me are here and don't want to fall into the traps and the problems that 30 years of this council fell into, that in one avenue led to Grenfell, they need to look and listen at what's happening at the inquiry. They need to understand when they're at the table how budgets work, how procurement works, because the professionals and that array of people out there who advise us and who construct things for us and who come and tell us everything is just wonderful with this project or that financial deal. We need to understand, because we are at the table, and if Grenfell should teach us anything, it is that we need as councillors to understand what's going on, because I can tell you that after 30 years, the only lesson that we ever have learned is that we never learn. We never learn, and we need to learn. And I remember Ed Daffin from the Grenfell United saying to the press the 10th time that they said we need to learn the lessons. He says, listen, I don't want to hear about learning the lessons. I want things to be done. So there's nothing wrong with an opposition party putting forward amendments that they have that speak to our residents. They're just as good as the policies that the majority party have put forward. It is our right to amend it. We can afford it. If we were in the majority, we would vote it through, and you would be saying the things that we are saying about we don't understand your amendments. Before this meeting, we were talking about we most of us were at a seminar on COVID, and I want to join the mayor in giving condolences to more of the people who may have died from COVID and those that are infected and their families. London has had 15,000 deaths. I think we've had 242 deaths here. And in terms of the changed restrictions, when I was 3 stories up in my flat the other day, I looked across London, and there is a huge pall of fumes and smoke across London. And I was struck by what we were told in the earlier meeting, that the stay-at-home message remains. And I have just picked up the message that comes weekly from the acting Chief Superintendent, Mark Lawrence, for the 3 boroughs, who says, of course, talks about the restrictions. We must continue to work from home where at all possible, and we must continue to refrain from gathering in groups.
Mr. Mason, you've had 5 minutes.
Yeah. My point there, Mr. Mayor, is that the streets are full of traffic, and who is ensuring that those people are essentially travelling? So we will debate the budget just a bit later. But if it's going to be the usual tribalistic barbs shoved across the chamber, number one, it's a bad advert for any residents listening in, and number two, it tells us that change of council, we have not. It will tell us that we have not changed one iota, and the leader has just proved that all her fine words boil down to no change.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Can I just remind councillors that we have a very tight schedule tonight, and I do need you to keep to the time, please. So thank you very much, Councillor Mason, and congratulations on your 30th budget. We now turn to the order of business. Order of business in accordance with standing orders. I rule that order of business shall be shown as in item 7 in the agenda. Councillor Thalasides, do you wish to speak?
No, I don't believe I do.
You do wish to move standing order 42, don't you?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I do. No, I do. I beg to move.
Councillor Lowry?
I second standing order 42.
So standing order standing order 42 is that standing order 30 be suspended this evening to allow Councillor Wheel and Councillor Mason up to 10 minutes for each of their speeches. And thank you for that. So item 8, submission from the leadership team, revenue budget, capital programme and council tax 2021-22. just take you through the process now. Councillor Whelan and Councillor Mason will make their budget speeches. The Labour group will then formally move their amendments. We will then have a general debate on the revenue and capital budgets. Councillor Mason will sum up the Labour amendments. Councillor Wheel will make the closing remarks before the final votes on the amendment and the recommendations. I therefore call upon the leader to move the reception of the reports and Councillor Wheel to second.
I'd like to move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wheel, you have up to 10 minutes to speak on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I presented our budget last year, the issue of COVID was beginning to dawn on us, but we were still a few weeks away from our first lockdown. In that budget, I proposed a large contingency sum with an eye to dealing with any possible fallout from Brexit, reasoning that we were entering uncharted waters. But time makes fools of all of us, especially lead members for finance. The reality was very different, but equally serious. Although I'm very relieved that we had that sum in contingency, I was wrong about why we would need it, and indeed quite how much we would need it. The impact of the pandemic has reached all our residents, and its effect has spanned terrifying financial instability, a business-threatening downturn, an existential threat to our high streets, devastating personal tragedy, depression, and increased social isolation. It has also brought out the best in many. We as a council have mobilised our resources to do our utmost for residents. Our principal resource in this emergency has been, as always, our people. Our officers have been utterly admirable and unflagging in their efforts to deal with the pandemic and support each other. They've worked flat out supporting people and businesses, often when suffering COVID-related illnesses or family bereavement themselves, and in several tragic cases, the loss of very dear and valued colleagues. I hope members from across the chamber will join me in recognising that contribution and pay tribute to them. I also want to acknowledge the work of the other aspect of our people, you, my colleagues. On both sides of the chamber, councillors have shared the challenge with officers of working in new and different ways, as well as strengthening your ties with your communities and working on behalf of them all in very strange circumstances. The financial challenge COVID presented this financial year was £43 million in gross costs, which comprised loss of income, increased need for existing services, and the requirement of new services altogether. Despite this, thanks to the government grants, some underspends, and our sensible contingency, we should be able to balance the 2021 books with little encroachment on reserves. When it boils down to it, the finance function of the council has a very simple mission: to make sure that we are spending public money efficiently and that we are spending it on our residents' priorities: Grenfell, clean green, working and learning, culture, and support for the vulnerable. For those of you who have been attentively tuning into the monthly leadership team meetings, and surely few can resist them, you will have heard my regular financial updates. And there are no surprises in this budget because we've been reflecting on and adapting to COVID challenges all year. You will also know that to balance our accounts in 21-22 and meet the needs and aspirations of our residents, I propose that we increase our council tax by 1.99% and raise the full adult social care precept to 3%, a total increase of 4.99%. I suggest this for the sake of prudence, but without enthusiasm. We know that people will be suffering from the economic impact from COVID, and I as a Conservative also believe that in general it's much better that people, not governments, local or otherwise, spend their money. But our tax raising ceiling has been increased for a reason. The Chancellor recognises the strain that COVID has put on our finances and our services, and acknowledges that those demands exceed the amounts we've received in grants. For those of you like me who are concerned about those who can least afford a rise, I would remind you that we have a very robust council tax reduction scheme, including an extra £150 for those who fall just under the maximum rebate. And we can be confident that will wrap around those in most need of support. For those of you who are also concerned about the overall level of tax, let me reassure you that we remain firm to our pledge to stay in the bottom quartile of council tax rates in the country. It's my aim that once the effects of COVID fade and our transitions programme gets into its stride, we will not have to raise taxes like this in the future. Referendum limits are there for a reason. I don't think anyone wants to see large increases, and I include here our very own minority party, who suggested both last year and this year that we should not increase the council tax element. I imagine that they will therefore join me in condemning the whopping 9.5% increase from the Mayor of London. His media brief celebrating the fact that it wasn't a 21% increase felt like watching one of those equipment demonstrators in upmarket shops showing off a ludicrously expensive piece of equipment. You know the ones I mean. They start off by pitching their offer somewhere in the mesosphere and then magnanimously lower it just for you to somewhere well into the stratosphere. The Mayor has all the cheek and none of the charm of a latter-day Del Boy. Perhaps the Labour group, with their concern to keep tax rises to a minimum, would like to write to the Secretary of State asking him to block it. Or perhaps it's only Conservative councils whose spending they want to restrict. Looking to the future, even without fairer funding, we will need to find £30 million worth of savings or increased income in the next 3 years. Given the restrictions around raising funds and government grants, we need to scrutinise our own expenditure and models of working very closely. I've mentioned the transitions programme earlier because it's designed to do just that, and it rests on 4 planks. Digitising whilst ensuring that anyone without access to IT is still included in council services. A workforce which is lean and fit for purpose and empowered to contribute via the spans and layers process, which has yielded a £55 million saving already as a contribution to this year's budget. Optimising operational property is the 3rd plank, reviewing the spaces we occupy and taking advantage of new ways of working. And a procurement process that gets the most out of the £230 million we spend annually on procuring goods and services. We're off to a good start, despite Councillor Mason's comments, with a £1.6 million saving in the waste contract this year, but there's scope for much more. This year, we've demonstrated the good housekeeping that keeps this council in a strong financial position. But I believe that we are only at the beginning of some major business transformations. Whilst we are prudent and looking for savings, we are also ambitious for our residents and their future. This is perhaps most clearly demonstrated in our capital programme. We will build new homes, new schools, and better facilities from which to deliver our services. Having said that, we have a new, more rigorous approach and methodology to our capital programme, which, although in its starting phases, has yielded results. This year, we've removed £17.6 million from the programme, saving just under £1 million a year in revenue costs. Part of this is by creating a pipeline status for projects such as the Latimer Road step-free access, projects for which we don't need to budget right now, but will be a priority once they're a realistic prospect. We've also shown that we are more than capable of dealing with the challenges we faced this year. We were the first council to set up a COVID hub and support shielded residents. We've achieved engagement in our test and trace system far beyond the government's. We have had great success in sourcing PPE to keep our services going. And we've supported our borough's 15,000 businesses by efficiently and strategically dispersing funds. We now clearly have a role to play in supporting the local economy in a way we've never done before, as my colleague Councillor Folkes is ably demonstrating. And we are uniquely placed to support the government's recovery effort and encourage a bounce back. This will become a much more important part of what we do. Finally, as a council, we need to think deeply and laterally to inform our submission to government when they eventually produce a devolution green paper. And I will be consulting on some of our ideas to make sure that we're well placed to respond when the opportunity arises. I hope all colleagues will join in that conversation, as well as residents, and consider measures like a tourism levy and increased business rate retention, which I believe could give local authorities greater incentives to improve their local economies. Despite the challenges we face, there is hope in the air, not least because of the vaccination programme, which is going impressively well. RBKC will be here to support our residents and businesses in the recovery phase, just as we've been here for them in the depths of the pandemic. To conclude, Mr. Mayor, I hope everyone from across the virtual chamber will welcome this budget. It represents yet another year of good stewardship, and I commend it to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wheel. Thank you. I now call upon Councillor Mason to speak for up to 10 minutes. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, I'm on. Of course, looking forward and onwards, as it says on page 27 of the budget report, predicts a 22 million budget gap next year and 8 million the year after. And of course, the government, who rushed through, as we saw today, the figures 892 billion to prop up the banks over the last year, have failed to properly fund local government. And of course, we were down 47 million just a few months ago, and we haven't got all of the money back yet. Those councils across London have performed stunningly in support of the COVID response and supporting the messages on the vaccine rollout. But of course, we lost cash, as I say. So cash staff councils across London have done a stunning job. But the London councils have said that the shortfall in the next year will still be 1.2 billion. And the Local Government Association says English councils as a whole will face a 6.7 billion gap. So that's that is a real problem, obviously. As we go forward, the councils will be cutting services, and of course we are cutting 10.6 million off frontline services here. But in terms of the Labour proposals, yes, we can afford to re-establish the Grenfell Scrutiny Committee, and anybody who was on the Scrutiny Committee meeting last week may well believe, after 4 hours of listening to quite a difficult conversation, that is the place where it should be. Yes, we should obviously review the 50 million Grenfell recovery strategy and budgets, because of course that sucks up lots of time and energy and criticism out there. Yes, we should establish a Caribbean centre in Kensington and Chelsea, not least because of the measures that were in the Westway Trust Tutu institutional racism report, and I think Councillor Thaxter is going to speak about that later. Yes, we should plan a programme of safe cycle lanes throughout the borough. This borough has failed over 30 years. In the 30 years I've been here, we could have been much further ahead. We opposed segregated cycle lanes, we opposed pedestrian areas. We even started taking out bus lanes, and a former deputy leader began that programme. Yes, we can implement a healthy homes inspection programme, and anybody who's listening to the dreadful evidence coming out of the Grenfell inquiry about how professionals act will support that. Yes, we can establish a compulsory registration scheme for private landlords, many of whom abuse their tenants and do not keep their properties up to scratch and charge extortionate rents. Yes, we can lobby the Secretary of State for approval to hold a referendum, perhaps this year, to expand the council tax bands to make them fairer. Why should some poor resident in North Kensington pay as much as somebody with a £50 million mansion in the south? Yes, we can support step-free access study, in this case for Latimer Road, and as Councillor Larry said earlier, the mayor back in the 2000s, I think it was Ken Livingstone, organised a programme for that, which was cut immediately when Boris Johnson became Mayor of London. Yes, we can carry out an area governance survey of residents of North Kensington, which has been a call for nearly 4 years now. The services that affect them should be, the decision-making process should be devolved down to them. Yes, we can abolish all home care charges, as has happened in Hammersmith and Fulham, and they can do it quite nicely, and so can we. Yes, of course, yes, we can establish a pilot school uniform grant scheme. And I was looking at the motion that was put up in 2011 on this council and voted down. Yes, we can appoint food bank welfare officers to help people lined up outside food banks because of COVID, and they were lined up outside food banks because of the austerity policies of successive Conservative governments before COVID. Yes, we can engage independent planning advisors to support residents, associations and community planning applicants, but of course, you know, the criticism for years has been that the officers who give paid advice to people who developers and construction industry people may not be seen, they may be seen as having a conflict of interest. Yes, we can implement the voluntary contribution scheme that the cabinet, or the leadership team as it's called now, approved last autumn, and that we were told 600,000 was raised in Westminster in a similar scheme. Yes, we can plant more trees, and of course we've had 37 trees chopped down on Warrington Green on Monday. That happened because of a decision this council wrongly made back in 2010, and perhaps that should have been on the Kroll report, along with Meanwhile Gardens, where the council spent nearly 10 years with a succession of developments, ending up with one which we defeated, that would have put £800,000 luxury flats in one of the poorest wards with the biggest social housing deficit in the borough. Yes, we can and should review scrutiny arrangements on the council, because it looks to me that no matter what good work the scrutiny committees are doing, and some of them are doing good work, they're not working any differently from the what we call the old system. It was just changed because change was necessary or seemed to be useful, but they're not actually scrutinising even all of the decisions that were made that were scrutinised under the old system. Yes, we can ensure that those very rich drug takers in the south who have drugs delivered to houses and parties face the same type of action as the street dealers do in North Kensington, who might be dealing £10 deals. And we have seen senior police officers and even cabinet members in the last 2 or 3 years saying that this sort of recreational drug use, which they say the rich are able to afford to buy more drugs, contributes towards the gang warfare, the knives and the shootings on our streets, because these gangs battle out for territory, and they're not doing it off £10 deals in the north. And of course, if residents want low traffic neighbourhoods in the borough, they may not, but where residents demand these, and I haven't seen any demands yet, but they should have the right if they wish. We do want to continue reviewing the procurement and commissioning strategies, because we've got 230 million of contracts out there covering an array of services that residents use. And we found some years ago that they were being mismanaged. They were losing money, and we need to continue those. In terms of, we need to continue reviewing those to make sure these things are not embedded in after Grenfell. On capital, well, we said 3 years ago that because we were accused of not doing anything about capital or not even looking at the entire budget, we started to review how the capital, the imbalance between capital and revenue, because people need to know that the more money that's spent on capital, and it's 261,741,000 this year, and 731 million over 3 years, the more money that's spent on capital, the less money will be spent on frontline services. For every million you borrow, you're going to pay 64,000, and there's 4.3 million in the budget for this financial year to cover last year's borrowings. And this year the borrowing is over 150 million. We proposed
Councillor Mason.
We proposed to reduce that by 45 million, which would still leave an overwhelming figure for the capital budget, because it may seem dry. The leader of the council may not understand how budgets work, but at least you should understand that in these COVID times, when we were 47 million down on COVID, that we need to continue to do smart budgeting, which people like me and the old Executive and Corps Scrutiny Committee started off. We started off looking at this imbalance because we didn't know COVID would come, But when we lost the 300 million after the atrocity at Grenfell, we knew we'd have to look at the balance. This council has continued on for 30 years until recently, just using the same old process for revenue and capital. And we had the situation up to Grenfell where the council had 300 million and was still cutting services. So this is a perfectly reasonable set of perfectly reasonable amendments. They are they are costed by the same officers. And by the way, we've got some excellent finance officers, Mike Curtis and Tarrant Eves, on this council, who I can't praise.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
And this is it's about choice budgets. This is our choice. You may not vote for it, but I would ask you to vote for these amendments as part of the budget, because we believe that this makes the best use of money and enhances the budget that we have before us. Please support the amended budget, Council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Well, we now move to the Labour amendments. I will now call the Labour amendments. Will Councillor Ali please formally move, and Councillor Thaxted please formally second the revenue budget amendments?
I beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Will Councillor Mason please formally move, and Councillor Denkos please formally second the Cabinet budget amendment?
The capital, yes. Yes, I move the amendment on the capital
Thank
budget.
you.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move to a general discussion about the budget. Members are advised that they should not restrict comments to revenue items, as we're taking the revenue and capital together. And we will address the amendments during this debate. And can I remind councillors that you have up to 5 minutes to speak? Who would like to speak to these to the budget, please?
Can I speak to Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Ali, yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just get to. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may start my time now, I'm also just checking the minutes so that we
you
can
have
get
5
done.
minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. Just want to let you know, Mr. Mayor, that this Labour group is now has been under new management, and I'm sure the leader of the council and the majority would appreciate that we have been doing very well with our numbers, and we are here to give this amendment, and I hope the majority party will agree with this amendment. This Labour group revenue amendment that I have moved and the Councillor Bosha seconded is indeed in line with the reality of the current situation of many of our RBKC residents who have suffered a catastrophic loss of income due to unemployment, and of course their businesses have been closed or have significantly been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, our amendment recommends the council not to increase the council tax and force a hardship to the people that are already suffering. Therefore, this year, 2021 and 2022 financial year, not to be increased the council tax. Mr. Mayor, it has now been nearly 4 years since Grenfell tragedy has happened in our borough, especially in the north of the borough, a tragedy that has affected hundreds of households directly, and thousands of our communities have been affected indirectly by the disaster. Many Grenfell bereaved families, survivors, and the local community in North Kensington are still concerned about what they see as an inadequate scrutiny of Grenfell issues, including children's education, dedicated services, and how the £50 million Grenfell recovery is spent. Therefore, our amendment recommends this council to review the £50 million Grenfell recovery strategy and the budget, as well as most importantly, re-establishment of Grenfell Scrutiny Committee, so that all Grenfell-related issues can be scrutinized under one scrutiny committee, rather than scattering to different lead members, so that everyone can say I'm not responsible for this. We asking for the council to re-establish Grenfell Scrutiny Committee at the next AGM in May 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Mayor, has highlighted the importance of healthy homes in the borough, a place where our residents can call home, a place they can feel safe and secure. a place our families can live well, work, learn, and play. However, a number of the council-owned properties have not been fit for human habitation, and we are still receiving some of the caseworks about the housing council-owned properties that are not fit for human habitation, as many of our residents have been dealing with mold, leak, and other unsafe materials. Mr. Mayor, you may remember, or you may recall, I proposed a Healthy Homes motion back in December 2020. Then the deputy leader of the council and the lead member for housing said the Healthy Homes inspection would cost the council 11 to 14 million pounds. Well, I'm pleased to inform him and to inform you and the rest of the councillors, as well as the residents of RBKC, that we have a much lower figure than that. We have a 1.6 million pounds, not just for 1, 2, but 3 years to inspect all council-owned properties to make sure that they are fit for human habitation, and to give every child who lives in a council-owned property and the basic possible starts in life. The COVID-19, Mr. Mayor, has also highlighted the importance of key workers and the role they play in our communities. And Mr. Mayor, we have been clapping for them for about a year now, month in, month out. But they expect from us a much better than that. We have the position to make a policy. We are the policy makers and we are the decision makers. Therefore, we recommend that the council's pilot housing project for just 14 homes is not good enough, Mr. Mayor. So we will ask this amendment, ask for the council to give 25% of the new built homes to give the key workers, because we know the 14 properties that has been advertised for key workers, 350 applicants, exceeding of 350 applicants have applied for just 14 homes. And what we are saying here, we need to give an opportunity for them to have at least 150 new homes. And we know this is financially feasible because we have analyzed and studied the financial model in 2019 on my scrutiny meeting. Mr. Mayor, this council is in a very fortunate position to build 600 new homes, but this would not have come without the support of the hard-working Mayor Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, the London Mayor of London, who have been working hard to give Londoners a very good opportunity and to build homes for our for Londoners, and in particular for our Kensington and Chelsea residents. Mr. Mayor, it's about time to thank the Mayor of London for his leadership, for his continuous leadership, and the grants that he provided to Kensington and Chelsea, so that we can build homes that has never actually been built since the World War II. Mr. Mayor, finally, I would like to recommend, because of this amendment, to restore the free swimming for under the 16. This is part of, we have to give opportunities for our youngsters. Just to give you an example, I personally have learned how to swim in a fast-moving river in Somalia, central Somalia, where a freshwater crocodile, you can see the side of the riverbank. So we had to swim for life, but we can give an opportunity for our youngsters to give them the opportunity to master the lifelong swimming skills without the safety.
Thank you, Councillor Ali.
I finish with this point, Mr. Mayor. I conclude with this. Without the safety of, without the fear of crocodiles, at the safety of leisure centres in Kensington and Chelsea, please let's give them, and also without adding up financial pressures to their already low house income. This is an opportunity to make life different for youngsters. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hammond, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to congratulate the lead member and her officers on this budget and for keeping the council's finances under control in this most difficult of years. I've got 2 points to make. The first on the capital budget and the second on the housing element, which will stray into HRA matters. So on the capital budget, and at the risk of sounding like a cracked record, my subject is the 2 lines on maintenance of historic built assets, which result from the working group I chaired a couple of years ago. During the current financial year, the first work has been done from this budget, with a proper survey on all the assets in the register that we created. In the new financial year, we should see some tangible work done on preserving the 2 unowned assets in the borough in most need, which are the Grade 2 listed Gaspar Mews Arch in my ward, which is badly fractured, and the Lexham Mews Arch in Abingdon ward, which often gets bashed by traffic. There should be enough money in the lines to do this work. It is a slight pity that what I think is a 50k shortfall in the lines that I pointed out at the OSC has not been corrected, or at least nobody's come back to me to prove that it was me that had made a mistake. But that's a small point in a budget of so many millions. And in any case, this one can be corrected by a new bid in next year's budget. This year's survey has demonstrated the need for a lot more work to preserve the unowned assets. and the survey report can be used as evidence for a new bid for next year. And I do hope the lead member for planning will direct his officers to prepare such a bid. On the HRA and housing more generally, we've got an ambitious programme for new builds and another ambitious programme to invest in the repair, maintenance and updating of our existing stock. I support these programmes and I congratulate the Deputy Leader and officers who have been working so hard to bring them forward. These programmes are necessarily very expensive, and that is without uncosted factors like what needs to be done to our housing stock to meet the 2030 carbon neutral target. That means we're having to borrow, and now is as good a time as any to borrow. But today's rock bottom interest rates won't last forever, and we shouldn't be lulled into a false sense of security when we could end up with a millstone of debt round our necks like some other less responsible councils, most of them Labour. We should therefore look very closely at the assets we hold and be prepared when interest rates on our borrowings rise to divest ourselves of those which do not contribute to the council's core purpose of providing specified services to residents, such as good quality social housing. For example, the HRA budget refers to charges for garages in Norwood Green in Southall. Now, I'm not sure what this council's doing owning garages in Southall. There may be a good reason, but it hasn't been explained. And there's no doubt an opportunity cost in terms of both the value tied up in them, as well as officer time in managing them. Value which could be invested in the excellent programmes the Deputy Leader is sponsoring, and which will directly benefit our residents. There will be other examples, including from the council's tidy commercial property empire of some 170 properties. I'm sure some of this is irreducible spare capacity within the residential property estate. And of course, we should consider what social goods we can provide from this estate, as well as the financial yields. But some of that estate might be standalone, and it's not the council's job to be a commercial landlord. Although if the yields in a normal year from this estate are spectacularly good, I wouldn't be in a hurry to divest ourselves from these parts of the empire. And I await an answer to my question in the OSC on the yields. But converting those opportunity costs of assets that don't contribute to core purposes is for the deeper future, as I think low interest rates are here for quite a while yet, and we will be able to lock them into our borrowing for an even longer period. Nevertheless, we should prepare for the inevitable rise by a full review of the council's capital assets in the nearest future, in order to ensure that we can exercise our core duty of providing decent social housing in the way the Deputy Leader is driving. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well done again to the lead member, and I will be supporting this budget.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I too would like to congratulate the lead member for this budget. I also would like to thank the staff for all their diligence, and in particular, Taryn Eves for her help. Others have talked about the council's expenditure, but I want briefly to talk about income, and income from business rates in particular, because COVID-19 has hit business rates very hard, much more so than council tax. RBKC is budgeting to raise some 370 million from business rates from some 9,100 properties, but of this we keep about 53 million, 9% of our income. Crucially, we are a major net contributor to central government, raising roughly 7 times as much as we keep, reflecting the fact that London business rates as a whole are distributed across the country. Everyone is aware of the huge damage done by the lockdown, necessitated by the government's response to COVID. Most of us are aware in very broad terms of the magnitude of the problems caused to our businesses, but it is still too soon accurately to calculate just how serious the damage is. What is really important, however, is to acknowledge, though, that there has been already significant attrition to businesses. Some have already become insolvent or declared bankruptcy. And although there has been a lot of government support, some more will do so in the coming months. At the start of the year, we were expecting to collect £350 million. Since last year, there has been 100% business rates relief offered to those in the retail, leisure and hospitality, accounting for some 230 million of that 350 million. Of the 120 million remaining, the collection rate for the current year will only be 75 to 80%. The number of businesses not paying or lagging behind their payments is in the order of 2,200, and total amounts estimated to be in arrears is 32 million. And I just think that given the uncertainties from business rates, prudence, I would suggest, demands that we have to raise council tax. We all know that leisure and hospitality have been hit very hard by COVID, and retail by a toxic combination of COVID and web-based sales. The loss of companies, firms, shops, pubs, restaurants and more going out of business is serious for us as a council, and indeed much more widely across the country, to say nothing of the personal tragedies for the owners and staff. But if businesses do close permanently and no office or shop or similar commercial activity takes place over that space, there are important questions about what should happen to that space. Given the demands for more housing, many will want to suggest that houses and flats are built there. Almost every high street in the country will be affected, so a discussion about this needs to be had nationally and locally. In pure financial terms, we receive significantly more per square area from business rates than from the council tax. But I stress they are very different forms of tax and cannot be easily compared. New space from businesses that are no more or which have reinvented themselves online may mean, and I stress may mean, more and possibly cheaper housing. But if there are fewer businesses from a council and borough perspective, it means fewer job opportunities for residents and higher demand for council services, notably social services and families and children's services. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thaxter, would you
Mr.
like
Mayor?
to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. I just want to say the North Kensington community has suffered due to the neglect, putting profit over people for far too long, moving to much previous years. Since 2017, the residents have suffered on several levels: the pre-existing economic inequality, Grenfell fire, which killed and caused many more to become homeless, the increased usage of food banks, and the large increase of universal credit application, bearing in mind that St. Helens is in the highest category, an increase in mental ill health, the unmeasurable psychological shock that resulted from the Grenfell fire, the COVID lockdown imposed since March 2020, and its immediate impact on mental and economic well-being. For this reason, and many more, Mr. Mayor, we believe that it's not right to increase the council tax. The pandemic shows us how important our health is to society. Planting trees across the board is one of the cheapest and biggest way to take CO2, carbon dioxide, out of the atmosphere. Mass tree planting in the borough, especially in the North Kensington, would be beneficial, considering the air pollution from the Westway Trust is at its worst. New research estimates that the worldwide planting program would improve 2/3 of all the emission from human activities that remain in the atmosphere today. The felling of the trees in Warnington Green Estate was not necessary. We are moving towards the target of the zero emission zone by 2030. Planting trees and green wall enhancement throughout the borough will improve health and well-being for all our residents. During the lockdown, we have experienced major changes to our lifestyle and in the way we commute to and from work and school. This needs to change. Mr. Mayor, our capital amendment has covered this point. We therefore recommend a planned strategy or program for a safe cycle lane throughout the borough, which will reduce cardiovascular disease and build and strengthen children's musculoskeletal system, reduce idle engine, provide better hair quality, move towards an active health behavioral change lifestyle. And finally, the community is requesting a Caribbean Center with the aim of showcasing the artistic expression of the local community through poetry, dance, history, science, medicine, career opportunities, access to higher education, mentoring and apprenticeship scheme, where they feel comfortable to access their heritage, and also live music through a historical timeline and line up with the first-class talent that is in the North Kensington and beyond. We propose a centre to demonstrate these talent to the world clearly, and by no means a singular voice, which the Tutu Foundation has clearly demonstrated that the Caribbean Centre is needed far more than ever. Therefore, Mr. Mayor, our amendment recommendation and establishment for our amendment requires an establishment for a well-funded and maintained Caribbean Centre in the north of the borough. So on this note, I'm asking all the Conservative councillors to support this amendment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thaxter. Councillor Dorian, do you wish to speak?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And may I also state my full support for the budget presented this evening by the lead member for Finance. It is not an easy task to deliver a balanced budget while delivering savings and protecting frontline services in such a year as this. Mr. Mayor, on Monday evening, together with colleagues on the Family Services Select Committee, we looked into the support provided by the Council to children and young people affected by the Grenfell Tower tragedy. In that vein, I'd like to welcome the £1.25 million that in total will be dedicated in 2021-22 for targeted support for children and young people in the community, including £500,000 for school-based provision and £500,000 for community-based provision. I would also note the planned use of the contingency fund where necessary over the next year for the ongoing support of the Grenfell Education Fund, which is, of course, partly funded by the DFE. Just to note, our working group will be continuing its engagement on this topic with local residents and organisations and will be presenting detailed recommendations to the Select Committee in April. I'd also like to call particular attention to the need to set aside funding for longer-term support for survivors and bereaved beyond the end of the recovery programme in March 2024. And I welcome the fact that this is referenced in the budget paper. As we have seen from incidents both in the UK and abroad, the reality is that the aftermath of such events, certainly for those most directly affected, lasts for many years, and it is certainly never too early to make sure we plan ahead. Mr. Mayor, if I may conclude on an entirely different topic, I welcome the Council's new waste management contract that has resulted in core total savings of £1.6 million, which has now allowed an additional £490,000 to be built into the budget for next year. With the end of lockdown on the horizon, hopefully we look forward to that having an impact on keeping some of the borough's most heavily trafficked streets clean, welcoming and open for business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dent Code, do you wish to speak, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support Councillor Thaxter's proposal in our capital budget for the Caribbean Centre run by the community. The need for this centre has become more essential than ever. We want all our communities to walk tall and be proud of who they are and where their families are from. Our Caribbean neighbours have over the years lost countless places they can meet informally to commune and share their history, and this has disadvantaged them. And we need to understand far better the frustrations, setbacks, and yes, even anger of some communities about how they've been treated historically and today. On Monday, John Boyega won a Golden Globe for his portrayal of Leroy Logan in Steve McQueen's Little Axe, an accurate and painful and shameful account of the first black police officer working the streets of North Kensington and the appalling racism he witnessed and faced. Sadly, this isn't past history, as we've seen with the Tutu Foundation report, and the very clear answer about how far we've come is not very far at all. And even now, as Councillor Thaxter's project is getting some interest from the council, the fear of many, I'm sorry to say, is that they want to take her idea, new to it, and take the credit. Mr. Mayor, this project isn't just about celebrating arts and culture, it's about affording Caribbean people who have long been treated with contempt at worst and patronised at best for so long, some dignity, space for reflection, and to meet, collect, and tell their history for and by them. Devolving power is not something the council finds easy. Do it this time properly, please. We constantly hear how little money the council has to spend, and yet even this year they're determined to spend £1 million on Holland Park's cafe, footpath, tennis court, floodlighting, God help us, and Holland House itself, a beautiful Jacobean manor house, designated at risk for the second time in 15 years to our shame, as it was used as a backdrop for the opera, while millions of pounds of council taxpayers' hard-earned cash has been poured down the drain of this loss-making venture. £1 million to pimp Holland Park. And meanwhile, over £7 million has been spent on extending Leighton House Museum, while residents queue up for one of our 23 food banks. Is this balanced, fair, and for everyone? I don't think so. I'm relieved the council is having second thoughts about spending £14 million socially cleansing the borough, buying property to place homeless households in temporary accommodation. Apparently, the report says, the business case is being worked on. I'll tell the next family threatened with eviction that the council considers them to be a business case for which they may be moved away from family, friends, school and work to stay temporarily in a place they can't call home. Perhaps Councillor Taylor Smith would like to use some of this £40 million to create more social rented housing at the Edenham site, rather than telling residents that the council can't afford it, but refusing to share financial details that might persuade them otherwise. The same old opacity, Mr. Mayor. All of this brings us to the second Kroll report published last week, a forensic audit of 4 allegedly dodgy property deals in and around Westway, for which the council should hang their heads in shame. And just to say that as somebody who contributed extensively to that report, how very disappointed I was to have not to have seen it before Councillor Campbell's very partial press release was ready. For those who've not read Kroll 2, it's slightly less damning than Kroll 1, which looked at the purchase of Warrington College, a process which the elected representatives of Golborne Ward were deliberately kept out of the picture. In the words of an officer, this was in case a rogue councillor decided to demand a judicial review for the council spending £28 million of our money without consultation or discussion. This is all in the report. Kroll 2, which summarises the Warrington fiasco and considers the deals relating to North Kent Library, Isaac Newton and the Westway Information Centre, reveals a culture of secrecy, distrust, lack of due process, disdain for planning policy, appraisals and scrutiny taken after decisions were made, lack of equality impact assessments, and quotes a reference to the council's hostility to the interests of working class communities. Hardly surprising, there is still so much distrust, Mr. Mayor. There is more in the 164 pages, which I'll comment on elsewhere, but I hope the council will reflect upon it as it carries on with the momentous task of post-Grenfell, post-Brexit and post-COVID recovery. And I ask one thing tonight, Mr. Mayor, please stop saying sorry and show us you've changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dentcode. Councillor Pascal, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd also like to add my thanks to the lead member for presenting such an excellent budget. I totally support the budget, but I'd also like to offer a thank you to the work by all officers, not just those involved in the budget, but all officers who've been working so hard in these extremely difficult and particularly stressful COVID times. I welcome the budget capital and revenue provisions in Section 9 for environment and communities. Vital areas during COVID, such as the waste collection and the new contract, which we collect waste from 50,000 houses per day, the street cleaning that is carried out every day, maintaining and managing our borough lungs and spaces by the Parks Department, much unseen work by officers such as Environmental Health and many others. Continuing to invest in more integrated street management through CREST, now including wardens, CCTV, planning, site management, park enforcement, and increasingly talking with residents' associations and local residents. Beginning to cut the S off silos out of customer services to transform them into an integrated customer-centric service. Good implementation of IT investment in this budget will enable this. Mr. Mayor, as the only councillor unable to vote for the January 2021 full council commitment to C0 2030, I would now like to take this opportunity to confirm that I fully support that motion. Implementation has been delayed by COVID, but initial positive steps have included Green Plan, cross-cutting working by officers from all departments, exemplary work at Lanc West, £1 million a year Green Fund for pilot projects, greening SPD, housing, sustainability and fuel poverty strategy, Green Fleet, borough 20 miles an hour limit, unlike the TfL through the borough, which is still at 30 in most cases, electric charging points, cycle quiet ways network, which is usually done in conjunction with local residents and resident associations, carbon neutral pathway studies, procurement policy, and fibre to the premises as opposed to the cabinet broadband. The Carbon Zero 2030 is a momentous commitment and a mountain therefore to climb. But as we emerge from COVID, we with partners will be able to build on these beginnings and up the necessary pace and cadence to achieve that date. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wason, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm always staggered by the detail, thought and work that goes into these council budgets. Not just the level of detail, but also the supporting text that helps us understand it all. So I would like to start with saying thank you to all those who have obviously worked so hard to put this together. I've had slightly more insight into this budget than in previous years after being asked to contribute to the Budget Scrutiny Working Group by the very persuasive chairman, Councillor Beryl Cox. I obviously support all the recommendations by this group, but in particular, the process of scrutinising the next year's budget should start as soon as possible in order that the budget can be scrutinised throughout the year. Given the current economic climate, to set a balanced budget with growth and investment of £6 million in key services, whilst implementing budget savings of £10.6 million is no mean feat. It must have been an unenviable task for those involved, but the hard part remains in trying to stick to it, given the uncertainty ahead of us. The decision to increase council tax by a full 1.99%, in addition to the 3% increase for the provision of adult social care, is a very difficult decision to take, and one that I do not believe was taken lightly, particularly as a Conservative. Council tax is a slightly cumbersome tax, part regressive, part progressive. However, given the restrictions on our ability to raise this outside the restricted 1.99%, we're forced to increase it in times when we are unsure as to whether we will need to raise it, thus increasing the incentive to raise it when we can. Personally, I strongly support this increase. RBKC is still in the lowest quartile, and while still providing excellent services. But my greater worry is about the growing possibility of a surge in inflation throughout the year, which, given the restrictions on our ability to raise taxes and the increase of interest rates that will surely follow, could potentially cause problems for our future budgets. As I've mentioned before, I have some strong feelings about the cost of last year's lockdowns on our society, and in particular, the most vulnerable, which is why I was delighted to see capital investment of 6.4 million in children's centres for family and young children, an investment of 8.2 million, the adult social care budget, into community daycare centres, and a special mention for the support for the 1,000 residents who suffer from dementia in our borough. As a member of the sandwich generation, that is some of you who do not, for those of you who do not know, that is for somebody who is looking after both their children and their parents. I know how badly the above is needed, and it is something that will help rebuild our sense of community once we're allowed outside of our homes. My final comment on this budget is the £5.2 million allocated for contingency. I believe this is essential. It was essential this year, and I fear it'll be essential next year. I've learned a lot of things over the last year, particularly about homeschooling. Firstly, I have a profound respect for teachers, not teachers' unions, I may add, but individual teachers, particularly primary school teachers and those incredible teachers who teach children with learning difficulties. How they do their job over Zoom with the patience they show is beyond my comprehension. There are many heroes from COVID-19, but they are mine. The second thing I learned about homeschooling is about bribery and corruption. Trying to get a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old to do homeschooling, unfortunately, involves both. The bribery yesterday was the promise of an ice cream. I was knowledgeably informed by my daughters that we could walk or scoot to the ice cream shop as part of our legally allowed daily exercise. As we walked back, licking our ice creams, my eldest daughter asked me whether all these shops and restaurants, boarded up for the time being, will open after everyone has been vaccinated. My response was yes, of course they will. There is a bright future that awaits us all. However, in my heart, I know that many of them will not. Lives have been lost, jobs have gone, and a mental health crisis boils over. That is why we need a contingency. That is why we have to raise council tax. And that is why we need at least £8 million for COVID recovery. We don't know what is ahead, but we need to support our residents and businesses as much as we can. Mr. Mayor, I completely support this budget.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be talking about one item only, which is related to planning. We all knew even before the COVID-19 pandemic that we are going to face tough years ahead of us financially. But COVID's impact has made it even worse. This is a hard reality, but we should not lose our focus on our residents' priorities. And one of these priorities is planning advice. Every time our residents are faced with a major development in the borough, we see many of objecting residents object to this proposal or the development for a variety of reasons. The developers don't have a problem to hire the best architects, professional planning, and legal advisors to present their cases in front of the planning committee, whereas our residents and associations are struggling to agree on who amongst their residents should present their case to the committee. This is not right, and there is no equal balance in here. We have been asking for many years to fix this problem, and the solution is very easy. We could and should have a new department sorted from the planning department consisting of 1 or 2 planning officers. Their sole duty is to provide free planning advice to our objecting residents and residents associations in the borough when they are faced with major developments. This proposal costs only £180,000 per year to pay for 2 planning officers, which is in our alternative budget, or to allocate funds to be available to pay for free independent planning and legal advice to our residents and residents associations when they are faced with a major development in the borough, which they are objecting to. Under the second option, the allocated funds of £180,000 will only be used when there is a need for it, to pay an external service provider to provide planning and legal advice to residents and resident association. And this is a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also I'd just like to say thank you again to the lead member and all the officers that have been involved in producing this budget. I'm going to be obviously talking to the HRA budget and business plan on the next item of the agenda. So I just really wanted to restrict my comments to the Labour amendments where they relate to housing. So just in order of the list that I have here, let's look at item 13. which is this Healthy Homes inspection. Now, I can hear the bells pealing outside, you know, from our council taxpayers, who are obviously going to be eternally grateful for the fact that we've dropped now the annual inspection on all rented homes. That was that ill-conceived motion that we had in the December council meeting that officers estimated that was going to cost £11 million. However, you know, it's now proposed that the council tenants themselves are going to pick up the bill for this inspection, because this is not a council budget item. This is a housing revenue item. But, you know, and Pat Mason, you're absolutely right. You know, I don't understand the budget. I don't understand a budget that includes £1.6 million being spent on these inspections. I mean, Healthy Homes inspections appear to be a bit of an obsession of the Labour group, and they're not necessary and they're not wanted. And they're not necessary because we already have annual inspections of council homes, and tenants can contact housing management at any time if they have any sign or any concern or any damp patches. That's something that they can do. And they're also not wanted, and we've heard this from registered residents. They're not wanted because residents believe additional inspections are unnecessary and intrusive. But what I find most distressing about this suggestion is that the idea was first raised at the Scrutiny Committee as a working party, and it was going to be chaired by Councillor Hammond, who I understand has been working on this, and it's set up to consult with residents and report on their findings. And this review is still in progress. We're waiting to hear the results, and the working group is yet to report. Yet once again, we have a proposal to spend a large amount of money. In fact, it's probably the third largest amount of money on the Labour amendment, based upon no evidence. Now, I mean, this for me is a clear illustration that it's actually the Labour group that's clearly not listening to our residents, and this council is. Anyway, running down private landlord registration. I mean, we've started a discretionary scheme on this, and again, I think it's worth of consideration, and we need to consider how we might extend this to private landlords in due course. On your item 15, PRS. I mean, again, it shouldn't be a one-off, and it's certainly not a special project, which obviously is how you're funding it. We are building very close ties with our housing associations, and we need to do this more. And it also links back into the homeless prevention programme, you know, that has been neatly shot down in your item number 17, but I'll come on that one in a minute. As far as item 16 is concerned, about increasing key worker homes to 25%, you know, although you've put it down as a nil cost objective, it's an ambition that we really do fully support. And just to remind you that 21% of the first phase of our new homes program will be key worker homes, and we have a pledge that we're going to maximise the amount of social rented and key worker rent. But this is very much down to the viability, and it has to be driven and looked at in terms of the density on the site. And I'm going to talk later about this. And if Labour really truly wants to get behind this, you need to participate and stop making silly claims about suppressing financial viability information, which is simply not true. And you also need to recognise that playing to the crowds on these consultations that we're having is not going to help. It's going to hinder our new homes programme. So item 17, I mean, not supporting the TA savings. And again, I don't understand this, and I'm somewhat bewildered by the Labour group's opposition to the potential savings quantified and putting NA in the amendment. What does NA mean? I mean, preventing homelessness is the core of our homelessness prevention strategy, and thus a core of this budget proposal. It's much better to stop homelessness happening than to wait for it to happen. And sustaining private tenancies was even a worthwhile suggestion from the opposition group under a previous scrutiny committee chair. So I don't understand what's changed here. Item 29, green walls. Yes, absolutely great. Good idea. Potentially they are fire hazards, and we are looking at roofs as better, but less, maybe a less attractive option. And then to end on, I'll try and end on a positive. And that is on the procurement review. I absolutely agree that we've got to be very vigilant in our process on this. You know, we've seen what's happened as far as the inquiry is concerned, and contractors and how contractors do. And that's something which I think we just need to keep on top on and review and adopt. I think just finally, because there were a couple of references to the capital budget, you know, pimping Holland Park.
You've had 5 minutes, Councillor Tillerson.
Okay, I'll just finish off to talk about pimping Holland Park. This is one of our largest parks, and at the moment very well utilised during COVID. And this is obviously as a result of us receiving enforced notices on what is a beautiful grade listed building. So again, it's something that we need to do. I think that's enough from me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Councillor Thalasides, do you wish to speak?
I'm happy to speak briefly, Mr. Mayor. I think the first thing to say is to commend Councillor Wheel for another magisterial majority party budget. I think it's fantastic. This is a budget that shows that we want to deliver a great place to live with continued investment in 600 new homes, to work, with commitments to workspace and travel arrangements to get people in and out of the borough to come here and work, and indeed to learn with our ongoing commitment to building new schools. This is a budget that helps us put communities first. And if I may turn to the Labour amendment very briefly, on planning, this is something that was raised last year, and I refer Councillor Bakhtiar to my remarks last year. And the leader referred to the Labour amendment recalling George Osborne. I actually think in some ways it recalls Margaret Thatcher. There's an extraordinary thing in it whereby in their sustained attack on the residents of Holland Park and our cultural amenities, we are asked to spin out and privatise Leighton House Museum. A quite extraordinary thing, given Labour's supposed commitment to the arts and to culture. It is this Conservative council that is investing in our cultural assets, that is promoting the interest of residents across my ward, and who will continue to do so over the coming year. On transport matters, I'm slightly puzzled by some of the financial commitments that are outlined. £100,000 for safe cycle lanes will get you something like 200 metres of segregated routes. So it is absolutely not commensurate with a safe programme across the borough, if that is what Labour are proposing. And likewise, to have no money allocated in the next financial year for low traffic neighbourhoods suggests that they're going to ask the mayor and his bankrupt TfL to bail them out again. I don't think that's a way forward. I think the council ought to be able to promote its own transport agenda and to work with TfL sensibly, but the scale of their commitments do not do that. This is a budget that works for us, for our borough, and I commend it to the chamber.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Evans, do you wish to speak?
Yes, please. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Wheel for her forward-looking budget, something that gives people hope and makes them feel that there is an end to this at the end of the tunnel after the pandemic. This is very important for people's mental health. A few points from Family Services Select Committee Chair. The gross budget for Children and Family Services is 147.4 million. This illustrates how much the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea values our young people. Our services for children in need, children in care, and care leavers has been rated as outstanding overall. The council has even expanded support for looked after children and care leavers until the age of 25. An additional $225,000 has been built into this budget to support these young people when they reach the next stage in their development, apprenticeships, further education, and employment. We will be providing life coaching so that the young people do not feel they're being abandoned at 18. And I think it's very, very important that we give the backing to our future, our young people. Our borough schools are exceptionally high performing, rating good or outstanding. We are supporting new schools. We will have 2 schools, one in North Kensington and one in South Kensington, specializing in support for children with special education needs. How wonderful. We are supporting children's centers, one-stop provision for families and children with advanced technology. And before the pandemic, we saw how much was they were utilized and how many different offerings there were for children, anywhere from coaching on employment, music, even boxing. And we'll go back to that, giving young people a place where they feel at home with their contemporaries. As chair of Family Services Select Committee, we recognize and scrutinize the direction of travel for Kensington and Chelsea's children and families. We look forward to review this. We want to make sure that the council is delivering with value, and that the service that is given to our family and children is a quality of service and a value of provision. We are dedicated to being a caring borough. Children are first in our borough. Children are us. Thank you. I recommend this budget. It's a very caring and deeply thought out budget. And I thank Councillor Wheel, the leader and the leadership team and all the officers who worked on this. It took a lot of work and it's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor El Nagi, do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you and good evening. Can I put my video on before bandwidth, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor? Can I put it off?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Put off my video camera,
if you wish
if you
to.
don't mind, for bandwidth. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I support Councillor Mason, who positioned the argument on the amended budget in a very correct. What I would like to add, Mr. Mayor, and I hope we all agree that access to decent healthcare and universal quality treatment that will lay down the foundation of a prosperous society. We need to keep reminding ourselves that public health is our council responsibility that started taking that role almost 8 years ago. And at the same time, we have COVID-19 that hit us, and now we are almost a year into that dilemma, where we are all experiencing a very stressful life on all fronts. And I was wondering how, where, and when we are going to go back to our normal life. We just heard from our chief executive, Dr. Quirk, and Ms. Clifford, our Deputy Director of Public Health, taking us through these steps to normality. And I wonder if we can call it a normality, outlining the roadmap out of lockdown, which is quite serious. We are still going through this pandemic, and where we are going through a very difficult time, and COVID has certainly amplified and exposed this ugly face of inequalities in our country in general, where mostly the vulnerable being hit hard on low income and who are living in a deprived area, and some pocket of deprivation. And this has been compounded effects in our North Kensington community, where we are still going through a trauma that's been affected by Grenfell Tower fire tragedy. Achieving social justice, I believe, is still a challenge for our leadership and community. As I said, this pandemic now has almost a year, where we are all anxious to get over it through vaccine rolling and primary care integration, which we welcome. However, what I would like to see a revisiting to the implementation of the 3% adult social care precept, where I believe already is being assumed in the balance sheet that's being calculated in our budget. And I would like to see a rationale of its implication and why there is a justification of implementing it. I believe, Mr. Mayor, there is a pressing need to ensure our elderly and special people in care homes are protected and cared for, while at the same time dealing with the rolling of vaccine in an effective that I witnessed at St. Charles Hospital last Saturday, where I had my first vaccine. I take this opportunity to extend a great admiration and thanks to all the staff who are logistically has done a fantastic job in an effective rolling of the vaccination program, and the people who are queuing outside in a very ordinary manner receiving their vaccine. I was very impressed with that operation. However, what I just heard today, a disturbing news regarding questioning some aspects of St. Charles operation, which I will seek advice on in terms of addressing the operation. It is acknowledged that the finances will have a really serious impact on the inequality in our borough, which is still unknown, and this has been addressed in the budget. This uncertainty, I believe, should be quantified in a proper way so we can analyze it and a plan be carried forward. To finish off, Mr. Mayor, I reiterate some points raised by Councillor Mason, that the 3% levy on adult social care to be revisited, the abolition of all home care charges, daycare, transport, and home meals, if this can be mitigated so there is no extra economic pressure on those using them, and to carry out a review of care homes where we saw the very high rise in the initial death of COVID in those establishments, especially regarding the digital inclusion, so we can put a proper monitoring in space and the challenging facing our council in addressing the health inequality. And to finish off in conclusion, Mr. Mayor, here that the health issue has no political boundary, and it is a serious matter for the prosperity of our residents to be addressed properly. So therefore, the real challenge then is addressing the inequality gap. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Stay safe and keep healthy.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kamali, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to touch on a few things. Last year, I won the Mayor's Award for the shortest speech in response to the Labour amendments last year for the environment. As Councillor Pascal eloquently reeled off, what the Conservatives do is actually get things done, and rather than the Labour amendments, which only mentioned planting trees last year. But what I will do this year, and I will try also once again to win that award, is comment somewhat on the Labour group's proposals for adult social care. I think it's absolutely right that we raise an additional 3% on the adult social care precept. Our adult social care teams have been dealing with unimaginable amounts of work. We also have to think of our residents who have not been able to see their family. They've been in their care homes, shielded, locked away, protected and supported by the council and by council staff. It's been incredible that they've done. And through that, they've been able to maintain all the other services that the council offers, all of which are rated good. What I'd like to say is it seems very strange that whilst agreeing that there is a need for adult social care funding, they're immediately willing to give it all back to those able to pay. I find it illogical, frankly, that with an impending issue of mental health, with known problems within the future of where care homes are going, and we have a motion on it later tonight, whilst we're busy trying to review the way that our care homes function, they think the best place to spend people's money is on those able to support themselves. I find it bizarre. The point of the council is to help those who need help. but to let those that can support themselves to do so. And going on from that, I think the 40,000 to carry out a care homes review, we do have a motion on that topic, but we're not going to prejudge it by writing in the title that we have to take them all back in-house. That's not how you do a review. That's just simply biased reporting. Otherwise, I just found the amendments a little bit lacking, frankly. We've had the largest public health and care shock in history, and there was a single line item to help those who were means tested and able to support themselves. It's absolutely bizarre, Mr. Mayor. And you know what, in order to win the award, I will stop now, but I think it's really strange. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor McVeigh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I'm not sure if I'll get a brief award, but I would just like to thank Councillor Mary Wheal on proposing this very sensible budget, and also to thank her for her prudence last year with her contingency plans, which, although were not for COVID, we were lucky to have them, as we are indeed lucky to have her. And we all know it's been an incredibly challenging year on every single count. To this budget, I always find it interesting looking at the fees the council charges. And on this aspect, I'm speaking as chair of the licensing committee. And the committee has already scrutinised many of the fees in the table relating to highways and premises. And we've been mindful of the difficulties many businesses have faced and have not increased the fees where possible, as we're endeavouring to support them. So Councillor Lindsay has already said about the toll on businesses and our high streets is huge. Our licensed premises alone have provided employment for almost 10,000 people in our borough. That is 10,000 jobs and livelihoods. And we really hope they will bounce back when we can all reopen. So I support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Rendell, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'd just like to touch base and say that I'm pleased to welcome the current budget proposals presented by Councillor Wheal this evening, and it's only good financial management that this council is able to spend and provide the services that we have, especially for our children and young people. So I'd just like to touch base that, our council puts children and young people first. We've done so much work over the past year, and indeed all our years, to make all our services we provide good or outstanding. And that's something that most other boroughs cannot put a claim to. So we put so much attention, so much focus on ensuring that our young people, especially the most vulnerable children in our borough, receive the most outstanding service that they possibly can. If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to turn my attention to some of the Labour proposals, or amendments, I should say, in their budget amendments regarding my portfolio of families and children's services. So one of them, for example, Mr. Mayor, is re-establish weekend and holiday opening for adventure playgrounds, of which the Labour group has accounted for £0. I must say, though, that community and adventure play is a non-statutory service. In the last 10 years, most local authorities around the UK have actually abolished these. About 540 have been abolished, and only 120 currently exist, 5 of which are in RBKC. So much so that we are committed still to having our community adventure plays for our children who want to utilise them. So we've got them right across the borough, as you know, and the Labour group's opinion to re-establish a weekend and holiday opening, I think while is good aims, we actually do. The majority of them actually are open weekend or indeed public holidays. So, for example, Little Wilm Scrubs is open all year round, even on bank holidays, except for the Notting Hill Carnival period. Horniman's, for example, is closed Sundays, but that doesn't mean that our community could go elsewhere, such as Venture, which is open on public holidays and bank holidays, except for the Notting Hill Carnival. So I understand what Labour's trying to say, but I think they're slightly misread that one there. And if we were to provide that particular element, it would cost us over £100,000. But again, I don't think it's really, really needed. In relation to that other point, which is to provide study and further additional staffing for SEND, which is special educational needs, I don't think we need that. Our service in this borough is outstanding. All the children that are in our service or need our service get an outstanding service, and most other boroughs cannot point to that as a particular aim. One other thing as well, we're opening our Kensington Queensmill School in September as well, with children with special needs will actually be able to go to school there. So we're investing so much capital in that particular work as well. More officers do not mean better outcomes. Our vulnerable children are currently receiving outstanding service, which is more than any other local authority can say right across the UK. So again, I think Labour's aims are good, but again, it's not particularly needed in this instance. In relation to a school uniform grant, I know this has been the big topic of debate at the Family Services Select Committee. We've worked really hard as the council to try and get our best for our most vulnerable children. And of course, school uniforms can be expensive. But we have been working closely with our schools, and each school has their own uniform policy. And of course, the costs vary. So what we've done, Mr. Mayor, would encourage people to contact their schools directly. Many schools, for example, have a uniform fund that they can help pupils with. There are some obviously second-hand uniforms as well that may be able to be utilised for those people who may wish to utilise that particular service. But again, the burden should not necessarily be on the council for that, where other providers, such as schools themselves, can help parents and families to achieve this particular aims. So the council should not be the one-stop shop, the answer to all of life's problems, where other community and other support processes are available. I'd just like to say that's all I'd like to say on that particular matter, Mr. Mayor, and I welcome this budget.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Will, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, a little slow there. Well, first, I'd like to endorse the budget. Councillor Will, you are truly Prudence. That must be your middle name. And I really want to echo what she and others have said about what a difficult year this has been for residents. It's just hard to imagine really what's happened in the last year. But I am conscious of the enormous work that has been done by our staff, particularly frontline staff. In my own area, all of our registry staff, all 7 of them got COVID before Christmas as they were still dealing with frontline residents. So thank you to them. Despite the difficulties of last year, there are still some positives, and I'm going to try and bring out some of those in the next minute or two. We have made £500,000 worth of investment in upgrading and extending our CCTV. We have introduced a new warden service, which is going down really well with residents. In our parks, which have been incredibly well used, we have invested and continue to invest. And I'm sure Councillor Dentcode will be delighted to hear that we're going to be spending money on Avondale, Kensington Memorial Park, Power Square, Cremorne and Ropers next year. And I hope she'll be a little bit more generous in her comments, perhaps, about parks and the expense we need. But they've been absolutely vital this year. So, we should not be embarrassed about improving them. We've also, I want to say something about leisure and the commitment we've made to GLL to keep that going so that they can open up and serve our residents as when they're allowed. And finally, I just wanted to pick up on the point about the Caribbean Museum. Caribbean Centre, excuse me. I know that this is a project that Councillor Thaxter feels very passionately about, and Councillor Siren and I have already talked to her, and we'll talk again, and particularly her idea about a study. But I did just want to point out, for those of you who haven't burrowed your way through all 50 recommendations in the culture plan, that at C4, we do talk about creating a Caribbean story house. And that is because we recognise how important the Caribbean heritage is. And I also should say that was in response to 5,000 conversations we had about the culture plans. It wasn't my idea, it wasn't officers' idea, that came from the community. And we've allocated money to take finding an archivist to carry on that work digitally at the moment. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Siren.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to everyone who has spoken so far tonight. Thank you also to all of the officers who've worked so tirelessly to put this budget together. I wanted to say a few words on the areas of the budget which support my responsibilities. We've made huge progress over the last year with how we engage and listen to residents, shaping what we do in the borough. And this is rightly reflected in an increase in resources and attention to community engagement. We will strive to get better and better at this. We've rightly committed to the Charter of Public Participation, and we are constantly working to try and involve local people in decision making and co-designing of the services that matter to them. We've put in place the Citizens Panel, for example, to get a wide, representative and varied views on key issues and initiatives across the borough. And we also talk regularly with minority groups in partnership with our VCS to hear the views of those who have been hard to reach and how they can influence what we do. COVID will clearly continue to have an influence on next year's budget and beyond. During the pandemic, we sought to support our local communities in providing equipment to schools, support for those who are shielding, and supporting emergency assistance, including food. We'll continue to work with our VCS partners to ensure we can support our communities as we come out of lockdown and start to think about what normal life will now be. And the COVID fund that Mary talked about will also support this. Inclusion will shape our approach to everything we do, and working across this chamber together to achieve greater and fairer equality is, I think, one of the most important things that we are striving for in this council. As we know, and as the budget sets out, Kensington and Chelsea is a unique borough, home to diverse communities. Celebrating our culture and heritage, which was born from this diversity, rightly has a place in this budget, and we have a process underway to record this history and celebrate it. We will do this in full consultation and partnership with residents who are a part of this history. Whilst we live in a borough of extreme wealth, there's also deprivation. We know that COVID-19 has had an impact on everyone, but it's particularly amplified existing economic, social and health inequalities. It's important to recognise that this budget has been set in the context of not only our council plan priorities, but also our COVID recovery programme. Most importantly, we remain committed to learning the lessons of Grenfell, applying those lessons to how we do things here, and to supporting all of those affected by the tragedy is the reason I am here in this role. I think it's very important that if statements are made about what the bereaved and survivors and the wider community want, that they're correct and based on fact. Needs and wants must come directly from those affected, and we must also listen and respect, as well as be ever grateful to those groups, including schools and voluntary and community organisations that support those communities and particularly our children. We are in the process of conducting a review of the Grenfell recovery strategy spending. This spend and the framework has been made public. I'm committed to making sure that the community voice is the loudest. We have a consultation underway for the dedicated service, which supports all bereaved and survivors. We welcome all input from the bereaved and survivors, and we will work with them to continue to co-design the support that they need. We won't tolerate those who make statements which are not based on fact in their name. Representation must be transparent. We have also held public meetings insofar as we can and have a consultation underway for the support for the wider community. And I hope all of those affected by this terrible tragedy will give their view, and I look forward to sharing the results of this review with you. Mr. Mayor, we face a year of challenge, not just from COVID, but also from the high standards we've set ourselves for having a two-way adult-to-adult dialogue with our residents and striving for equality for everyone. I want us to be judged on these, and we will be transparent and open in how we aim for these goals. I'm confident this budget will support these intentions and our work, and I hope everyone will join me in supporting this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Foulkes, I appreciate there are other councillors wishing to speak, but I think we've had a fair cross-section of speeches on the debate this evening. So I'll take Councillor Folkes and then we'll go to the summing up on the Labour amendment. Councillor Folkes.
Thank you very much, and I will be brief. I want to join my colleagues on congratulating Councillor Wheel on her excellent budget. It's both sensible and prudent, and it must have been the hardest year ever, and the challenges to come up with these measures in this year. Very, very hard for her. From the business side, since summer, nearly £20 million of non-discretionary grants have been handed out to over 2,000 businesses that have been adversely affected by COVID. And I think this has come up a lot in the speeches today, that we really recognise how hard it has been for businesses and how hard it is going to get even worse for people, for employment, for jobs in this borough. So I was very glad that early on in the COVID pandemic, we were able to ask Councillor Wheel for £500,000 to come up with a business hardship fund, which she agreed to. And this has allowed us to help some groups who were initially overlooked by some of the government grants, such as market traders and taxi drivers along the way. I also was very pleased to see some of the extra measures that have been put in place today by the Chancellor for businesses and for employment. I also wanted to thank all the library staff who have been really fantastic through the pandemic and incredibly innovative in coming up with other ways to reach the public. And some of the money that they've spent during this time has been very helpful, such as developing technology in our self-service and open access. But I wanted to just flag up in the capital programme that there's 1.9 million that has been put aside for improvements and repairs across our libraries. Our libraries are so important to this borough, and particularly I wanted to flag up the 600,000 for the central library entrance and safe space improvements, which I think we are hoping will become a business hub for people to come and be able to find out more information they need from the various systems that are available in the library, such as the FAME system, to get more information about libraries, about businesses. So thank you very much to Councillor Wheel for her sensible budget, and I highly commend it.
Thank you very much indeed. We now go to summing up, and I call upon Councillor Mason to sum up on the Labour amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try my best in 5 minutes with 21 different summings up. I may not get there. Councillor Ali, who proposed, of course, flagged up our intention not to implement the 1.99% council tax increase because of the catastrophic collapse of people's finances, etc. And of course, Councillor Lindsay said we have to raise the council tax, and Councillor Inalgi asked why we need to implement the 3% adult social care levy, which of course we agreed to implement. And of course, the answer on the council tax is that the government expects councils to increase the council tax and adult social care levy, because it's actually part of the settlement. But of course, both the London councils and the local government association say it's not an adequate way to fund services. It doesn't work equally across all areas. Some people get more than others. Councillor Hammond, borrowing. Well, of course, we should borrow when low. Well, of course we do. This is something that we've tried to tackle, the large amount of borrowing over the years, because after Grenfell, before Grenfell we didn't have to borrow to build. Now we have to borrow to build. Therefore, it becomes important about what size the sum is, because we have to pay the money back and we have to pay interest every year on it. Councillor Thaxter, of course, talked about the suffering of the local communities in North Kensington after Grenfell, the food banks, the universal credit, the shock, the mental horror they have, the Caribbean Centre, of course, which and described an array of uses that the local community might want to put there, and of course we fully support that, because, as I say, it's a recommendation from the Westbury Trust institutional racism report. Councillor Adurian talked about a balanced budget, providing good services. Of course, our budget, which without amendments would also be balanced and would also provide good services, because it would be yours and ours together. So one doesn't mean the other won't happen. Councillor Dentcourt, of course, talked about the many things, the Caribbean, the Kroll report, which of course we've seen the Kroll report, what it says. It's another, it's another report, and I hope that we will listen to it. We will obviously have a response to that later on. Councillor Wasson talked about, also talked about the 1.9% council tax, which of course is a difficult decision, but of course we are advised, the lead member will tell you that we're advised that we really have to do it, otherwise we may be called into the headmaster's office. Councillor Bakhtir talked about the planning, the free independent planning advice offices, which we also talked about earlier. Councillor Taylor Smith, of course, talked about healthy homes, and he said, of course, I may be paraphrasing him wrongly, that I therefore don't understand the budget. Well, of course, there's a lot of people in this council don't understand the budget. I didn't understand the budget. The budget worked till about 10 years in, but he could probably get on the bus and we can do a seminar on this. There's a lot of people on this council that don't understand the budget. They're too young. They've been here for too short a time to understand the budget. Whizzing along, Councillor Thalasites, yes, planning proposals, sustained attack on, Councillor Evans, Councillor Inalgi. He talked about the health issues, the inequalities, getting back to normal life. Well, who knows what that will be like. But of course, if we look out there on the streets, the minute the lockdown was released in December, I walked along the street and the places were full as if they'd never been closed, and the traffic is already causing pollution clouds across London. So I think my feeling, and it's not a scientific feeling, is that people want to get back to what they knew before. They don't like change, and they want to get back to what they did before. And the few places that are open in hospitality, most of those who cannot get any of those grants that Councillor Fox talked about, and others can't get grants from the government, couldn't get furlough, who are open, people are flocking around them because they want to get back out of their houses. They want to get back to normal, basically. We don't know what the new normal will look like, but I think it'll look much more like the old normal than we think. Councillor Kamali, 140k, bizarre. He thought that our proposals were bizarre. He couldn't understand why we were implementing the 3% adult social care levy. I may be misrepresenting him, but of course, as I say, our budget, if we were the majority party, our budget would be voted through, and it would be the budget that would be implemented. There would be no problem with that. Good financing, good financial management. Councillor Rendell talked about good financial management, and of course we believe in good financial management as well. That's why for the last 8 or 9 years, through our chairmanships of various committees, the one I chaired, we have championed good financial management and the better arrangements of better conduct of the budget, both revenue and capital, because the capital budget may not be very sexy, but of course, as I would say to Councillor Campbell, if you tie stacks of money up there, you can't use it to provide those very important resident services that we need to do in the next year. Councillor Will, cultural plan, Caribbean Centre. Well, of course, the Caribbean Story House, no matter which residents said that they wanted it, is not quite the same as a Caribbean Centre. I hope that we're not suggesting that we'll have one and not the other. Perhaps it can both become one in the end. Not for me to decide. Councillor Sarden talked about community engagement, review of the grant strategy, committed to learning lessons. Well, of course, I hope that my phrase, the only thing we ever learn is that we never learn, is not true, but that's how I've seen it over 30 years. Councillor Fox talked about the 500,000. I think that, can I just finally say that everyone from the government to the council talks about hardship funds, and those things don't filter down to, I think, quite 33% of the the businesses in a survey the council did said that they couldn't get furlough, they couldn't get grants. And can I just finally say, Mr. Mayor, that I wrote to Rishi and supported the mayor and 600 businesses on continuing the business rates holiday, the VAT changes, and he's done some of it, but he's only given the business rates holiday till June, and then 75% discount. And the lower VAT for hospitality at 5%, which it is at the moment, and
Mr. Mason, can we stick to our budget, please, and not the Chancellor's?
Well, yes, but this is all to do with support. This is all to do with support for our businesses, and there are.
Had your 5 minutes.
Yeah, there are quite a number of businesses out there who haven't had the support. So, having said that, I support the. I would ask the council to support the amended budget with the Labour amendments in it, because we think that's obviously what you should do. So please support the Labour amendments in the entire budget.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Wheel, you have now to reply to the budget debate, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to begin my summing up by thanking the finance officers, particularly Mike and Taren. I think the breadth and quality of the debate tonight is testament to the quality of the papers they produced and the sound advice and support they give to both sides of the chamber. Also, my thanks are due to the OSC working group for their insights and advice. I won't go through the Labour amendments line by line. Colleagues have covered most of the ground, but I thank the minority party for their contribution to the debate. I also want to thank, in addition to my leadership team colleagues, Councillor Hammond for giving an excellent example of spending money to support residents' priorities, and Councillor Lindsay for his acute observations about the importance of income and business rates. Councillor Dorian brought a clear focus to the importance of our continuing support and commitment to those affected by Grenfell. Councillor Pascal neatly summarised the importance of our spend on keeping our streets clean and our environment green, whilst Councillor Wason eloquently described the issues surrounding increases in council tax. Councillor Evans, who does such a great job in chairing her select committee, was so right to remind us how important our services for children and young people are to us as a council. And finally, Councillor McVeigh made some excellent points about fees and businesses, although she did make me feel incredibly dull by calling me sensible. But I think I can forgive her. Turning back to the Labour amendments, I do want to draw your attention to some of the more egregious aspects of it. I spoke earlier about good housekeeping. What would almost certainly not be good housekeeping is kicking the can down the road to even more uncertain times, as their proposal to rephase the collection fund deficit would do. To knowingly add more than a £2 million burden to 22-23 when we can balance our books this year seems extraordinary. In fact, almost as extraordinary as reducing our contingency at a point of known crisis and uncertainty, when we have almost uniquely had to draw down the full amount this year. These two suggestions are just the loose accounting of a party that doesn't expect to exercise any responsibility. What I do not understand is their suggestion of a reduction in the Grenfell legal budget. That budget is vital to ensure that truth is heard at the inquiry, about which we have made as a council a solemn undertaking. Our wider legal budget is a vital support to a range of council activities, from child protection to planning. Without sufficient in-house expertise and time, all our departments would have to seek more costly legal advice elsewhere. I welcome the opposition's focus on procurement and commissioning. However, they must have missed the procurement strategy adopted in June, too busy perhaps plotting a revolution. We can support, through that strategy, we can provide support and strategic overview to departments on both procurement and, importantly, on ongoing contract management. And it's underpinned with the necessary resource for implementation. An experienced team is now in place, and we should have our first outcome reports in July. And this is central to the transitions programme. The suggestion that we should raise a voluntary contribution to plug a hole in our budget is understandable given the minority party's profligacy. Somebody has to make up for the costs they can't kick into next year, but I oppose it. I don't think if they were using it as a support for the general fund, as they suggest, rather than funding extra projects, we would raise nearly as much as they suggest. And secondly, as articulated in the budget document, some charities express concern about the scheme impinging on their ability to raise funds, and so we listen, and the process has been paused. I want to end on a positive note. There are two aspects of their budget that I can agree with. Firstly, our capital programme is under heightened scrutiny, and although the capital is already included in the medium-term financial strategy, which I think they're implying it isn't, I am happy to discuss how this may be done in a clearer fashion, if that's what they mean. And secondly, I'm happy to work with them on next year's modern slavery statement. However, overall, I ask you to reject the opposition's amendment and adopt the budget in its pristine state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to the vote on the Labour amendment to the revenue budget. I would remind members that votes on the Labour amendment and the revenue and council budget and council tax need to be recorded in detail in the minutes. There will be 3 recorded votes. The first vote is on the Labour amendment to the revenue budget. Members are asked to register their vote by using the screen in front of them. Should you press a button in error, you can correct it by pressing again. When you have voted, please press Done to submit. Please vote now on the Labour revenue amendment.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now closed.
Thank you very much. The voting is now closed. For the amendment, 26%, against 71%, abstention 2%.
Mr. Mayor, can you hold on 1 second? One of our councillors put the vote in the chat, and I think it's because it didn't work. Can you just double check that councillor's vote, if possible, to see if it worked in the poll? Otherwise, we'd have an issue.
Which councillor was it?
Councillor El Nagi.
Can we confirm, please, that Councillor Nagi's vote has been cast?
One moment, Mr. Mayor. We're just checking the votes.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor. Thank you.
Do you vote?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe Councillor Nagi's vote was included, so I've added that in now, and the tally should read 1 additional vote for.
Thank you very much. So on the basis of that result, the amendment is lost. We now move on to the Labour amendment to the capital budget. The second vote is on the Labour amendment to the capital budget. Members are asked to register their vote by using the screen in front of them. Should you press a button in error, you can correct it by pressing again. When you have voted, please press Done to submit. Please vote now on the Labour capital amendment.
Done it.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Have you received my vote? Because I don't think it's working on my end.
Can we please check that Councillor Thaxter's vote has been recorded?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councillor Hammond. Could you please check that my vote was recorded on the first vote, because I've got different indications in front of me this time round, and I was against on the first vote.
Can we just deal with this one, Councillor Hammond, for the moment, and then we'll come to that.
Somehow, I think calling it out might be quicker in future.
13 votes for the amendment, so I presume that all the Labour group have voted. Councillor Lowry.
Okay, could you double check Councillor Thaxter on the revenue too, if she had the same issue? Because it wasn't the same voting numbers for both motions. There's 5 extra responses on this one.
Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, the vote for the capital amendment has closed now. And
can you make sure that? Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say it doesn't appear that Councillor Thaxter's vote on the first amendment was counted, and I don't believe Councillor Hammond's was either. So I've now recorded those as 1 additional for and 1 additional against.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So on the capital budget, based on the figures there, 28% for, 70 against, and 2 abstentions, I say that amendment has failed. So we now move on to the vote on the revenue budget, capital programme and council tax 2021-22. The council is asked to note the updates in report 8 and to approve recommendations set out in paragraph 2.2 of report 8.1 from the leadership team. Please register your vote by using the screen in front of you and press done to submit your vote. Please vote now.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a voting card that's appeared yet.
And
someone check on Councillor Taylor-Smith, please.
It may be in the chat, Councillor. If you open the conversation bar, you should see it there.
Chat. Okay, hold on. Right, so let me just check. I've got it appearing a number of times. I've got council budget 2021, council budget 2021. I just want to make sure I'm filling in the right one.
That is the current one.
Mr.
Council
Mayor,
budget.
could I ask Mr. McCall?
Could we just wait for one conversation to finish, please?
Sorry.
Tom, do you want to just finish that?
Okay, sorry. Let's try that.
Councillor Lowry.
Yeah, looks like that's gone through. Thank you.
Could Mr. McCall check my vote? I'm Councillor Lowry on the first. That's the revenue amendment. Apologies for asking you now. Do you mind just checking if mine was recorded on the first one? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can confirm your vote was recorded. Yes, Councillor Lowry.
Thank you.
And I'm now closing the vote on the council budget.
Excuse me.
Councillor Beryl Cox, I know you're having trouble actually doing the voting.
Exactly, thank you. I just wanted to confirm I was unable to vote on the first because I couldn't move my hand properly.
Do you wish your vote to be recorded on both amendments and the final vote on the budget?
Yes, please. I managed to get to the other two.
Okay, so just confirm which one that was, please, Councillor Beryl Cox.
It was the first one, I think, on the revenue budget.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So on the vote on revenue budget, council capital programme and council tax 2021-22, for 70%, against 28%, abstained 2%. I therefore declare that budget carried. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for being patient on the voting. We now move on to item 8.2, and I call upon Councillor Taylor-Smith to move the reception of the report and the leader to second on the HRA business plan and HRA budget report. Councillor Taylor-Smith.
I'm happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Leader.
And I'm happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor-Smith, you wish to speak up to 5 minutes on this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So last year I presented a business plan to the full council which proposed a 267 million capital programme subject to tenders coming back. And this year, having received some of the tenders, I'm proposing a capital programme of 370 million. And this is a staggering amount of money, which places a greater strain on the HRA, but we really are remaining steadfast in our ambition to get our homes up to a good standard. But it does mean that we have to make some fairly tough decisions. On rent increases, we'll see a 1.5% increase. And this is the first time since I became lead member that we're doing this. And on recharging, an 8% increase in energy costs. And of course, there's going to be an increase in borrowing. But I am, encouraged and invigorated by the fact that residents share our vision and understand the reason behind us making these tough decisions. And the council and the residents are unrelenting towards our shared ambition to get a position where we have quality homes and quality services. 30 million of the 370 million represents fire safety improvements as we strive towards the best possible standards, and we have adopted and we are delivering the recommendations of the inquiry, and there's going to be absolutely no compromise ensuring our homes are safe. And we have a very ambitious roadmap in greening our housing as well, and this may well add another £100 million. And this is all on top of the 250 million that's set on our aside for our new homes programme. So these ambitions combined will see this council spending £750 million on our housing. And as a council, we need to come together and support this ambition in the recognition of the difficulties that we're actually facing on this. And I think councillors understand the need to renew our homes and to relieve the borough of an unacceptable high level of homelessness. And I believe it's incumbent on all of us, therefore, to retain that ambition and understanding and to realise that there's not a trade-off on this. If we want to house our homeless, tough decisions will need to be made, and there should be no room for politics in this. We need to involve all our residents in these tough decisions, remembering that bricks are for building and not for throwing. Tough decisions north and south of the borough, including those at Edenham, including the potential of top housing sites. These are unpopular things, but they're things that we must investigate and look at. We're going to have no regeneration, but we do need to innovate, utilising every spare bit of land that we have if we're really truly committed to addressing the acute need within our borough. And we may be a densely populated borough, but this is not the countryside. This is inner London, and we can't be NIMBYs on this. So it really is back to the proverbial bus and getting on the bus. And it's incumbent on all of us, including local ward councillors, to get on board and to encourage residents to do the same. The Labour group say they support the New Homes programme, and I'd like them to see them show it. We've put our money where our mouth is to meet these ambitions, and I'm happy to be challenged on retaining and maximising social and key worker homes as part of our programme, as well as asking this from our developers. So, Mr Mayor, reflecting on the challenges we face, homelessness is the most pressing, and we're budgeting £800,000 more in additional TA costs as part of our homeless reduction strategy. And this is a cornerstone of prevention being better than a cure. And early indications are very positive. And as we look at the threat of increase of evictions when this ban ends in March. So it's vital to prevent people from reaching this crisis support. And that's the right approach. But, you know, there's obviously still very much we still can do. And I don't want to be self-congratulatory, but I do feel that we're heading in the right direction. And I must give credit to officers who have reacted incredibly well during this pandemic. Housing is a vast amount of rough sleepers, intensifying welfare calls for thousands of tenants and supporting struggling commercial businesses within our portfolio. And they've done this in a very flexible way. So we must also celebrate making the most out of the government funding on Lancaster West, and the most recent bids are going to help to green the estate to reach a net zero carbon and truly be a 21st century estate. And this can lead the way for the rest of our borough. So we've been putting our residents first through this approach, co-designing housing policy and strengthened even more by our resident involvement strategy. You know, but we have a very big year ahead. We've got policies on key worker homes, empty homes, delivering our new homes, allocation scheme and a Grenfell Housing Legacy Fund. So it's going to be very busy in the year, but our ambition to deliver for our residents. And we've still got that. And this is going to drive us to make even more bigger strides towards being a top authority. So I'd just like to end again by repeating my thanks to the staff that have contributed and worked so hard during the year and will help us on these challenges ahead. Thank you, Mr. Ware, and I'm happy to commend the report.
Thank you very much. Would any member like to speak on the HRA business plan and budget report? I'm not hearing anybody, so...
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I wish to say a few things, if you don't mind.
Councillor Ali, yes? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do welcome this strategy, and we will support because we want homes in RBKC. We want homes to be built for our key workers, and I'm pleased to say the Labour Group will be supporting this. And of course, all credit goes back to the support, the leadership, and the grant that the Mayor of London has provided to us, and to kickstart with the planning and the building of the new properties, new homes in RBKC. So we thank the Mayor of London for his continued support, and I hope to see him back again. And for that reason, we will be supporting. And I hope 150 homes of the 150 of the new homes will be allocated to the key workers, because we know what they have done for this country and for this borough. And without them, this pandemic would have continued for so long. So to thank them and recognize, not just clapping for them, but recognize the hard work they put day in, day out, night in, night out, we owe them to give this back to them. And I think the Labour support will be ready for this time. And I hope that in the future we will challenge the leadership to make sure that they will commit and fulfill their promises. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Anybody else would like to speak? Okay, thank you. So the council is asked to approve the recommendations in respect to reports 8 to A and B. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. I declare them carried. We now move on to Annual Treasury Management Strategy 2021-22.
I beg to propose, Mr. Mayor.
You haven't been asked yet, Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, I thought that was a dramatic pause that I needed to fill.
Do you wish to propose? And the leader, do you wish to second?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, I invite you to talk on the report if you wish to.
I wouldn't have dared start it off there. I just want to say a few words. The Treasury Management Strategy Statement is something that we review and approve annually. It describes how we manage cash flow, investments and borrowing. And the last 12 months have been particularly challenging, and the return of our 177 million pounds worth of investments has been very low, 0.2%, and we're not expecting an uplift anytime soon. The ongoing impact of COVID and future trading arrangements in the EU are likely to affect our yields. COVID-19 has resulted in quite a significant delay in much of our capital investment. So some of this borrowing and consequent revenue costs we expected haven't been needed. On the other hand, that capital spend is there for a good reason, and I look forward to us picking up pace and therefore borrowing costs on delivery as we emerge from the shadow of COVID. As we enter the next 12 months, with the advice of our newly appointed external Treasury advisors, we've reviewed our strategy to ensure that we're in the best position to take advantage of any opportunities as they arise for investment. And it's for that reason that 2 changes are proposed this year, which I want to bring your attention to. They remain relatively low risk, but they will enable us to achieve slightly better returns should the opportunity arise. We will look at investing in fixed income funds for the opportunity of enhanced returns and the use of enhanced money market funds. I just want to conclude by saying that in such uncertain times, we'll continue to keep this strategy under review and explore other new but prudent opportunities. At the same time, we'll ensure our capital programme remains under regular scrutiny, which we've discussed earlier in the evening, because at a time when capital investment involves additional borrowing, I need to assure myself and the rest of the leadership team and the rest of the council that borrowing to which we commit is for the right expenditure, aligned with our residents' priorities and funded efficiently. I commend this strategy to the council.
Thank you very much. Would any member like to speak on the annual Treasury Management Strategy?
Yes, briefly, Mr. Mayor, because I assume you want to get to motions. We've said quite a lot about capital tonight. The Labour Group capital amendment alters the capital programme borrowing requirement that we discussed earlier, that's discussed in the Treasury Management Strategy. So, of course, we will abstain on the vote for that reason, because we'd have to amend the capital the Treasury Strategy. But there is also the question, and we've raised this before, and we need to look at it again, of if and how the investment strategy satisfies the Modern Slavery Act and the Modern Slavery Statement the Council recently adopted. And of course, we will need to ask what efforts the Council is making to ensure that the money that the Council invests is not being invested in companies using slave labour practices against their workers, or carrying out human rights abuses, or damaging the environment and communities that they do business in. And the FTSE 100 companies have been especially deficient in complying with the requirements of the Modern Slavery Act. There's many reports on this, or when they do report, they may say they have taken an action to reduce some slave labour activity, but do not explain the process that they put in place to do it. So perhaps we could start by asking Arlene Close, the Council's Treasury Management Advisors, to screen the companies and investments made on our behalf for compliance with the modern strategy statement. And of course, we could look at the updated version of the Business and Human Rights Resources Centre, which analyses annually FTSE 100 companies in relation to the UK Modern Slavery Act, and looks at the disclosure and actions, and there are other reports. So given that we have a modern slavery statement the Council has signed up to, and there is a Modern Slavery Act 2015 that they're supposed to comply with, then perhaps we need to look at this as part of the management's annual Treasury strategy, which I don't think we do at the moment, or if we do, it's not contained in the strategy. So we will abstain on this report for those 2 reasons, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wheel, do you wish to sum up, or should we go straight to the agreement?
Straight to the agreement, please, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Council has before it the recommendations set out in Para 2.1 of Report 8.3 from the leadership team. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Labour Group abstains. Please record.
Agreed. Agreed.
The Labour Group have abstained, but the majority have agreed, so I declare them carried. Reports from the Council side committees. To call item 9, reports of the Administration Committee. I call upon the leader to move the reception of the report and Councillor Thalcitis to second.
I'd like to move the reception of the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And I would like to second the report, Mr. Mayor.
So call upon Para 1, pay policy with recommendations. Does anybody wish to speak on this?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No.
Thank you very much. Is the recommendation at Para 1.5 adopted?
Agreed.
Agreed.
I declare that carried. To call Para 2, members allowance scheme with recommendations. Anybody wish to speak on that?
No.
Thank
Agreed.
you very much. Are the recommendations at Para 2.2 adopted?
Yes.
Yep.
I declare them carried. Para 3, changes to the Constitution with recommendations. Anybody wish to speak to that?
No.
Are the recommendations in Para 3.2 adopted?
Yes.
Yep. Agreed.
I declare them carried. Item 10, matters referred by the Scrutiny Committee. There are no items for this meeting. Questions to lead members. I am conscious that we have nearly sat for 3 hours. We have some important business to get through before we move to motions. Can I ask the two whips that we will extend by a sort of 10-15 minutes informally to get through the business, and we'll probably have to delay the motions to the next meeting. Whips, is that agreeable to you? And I'll put that formally in a moment.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Get to end of Festo 11.
So, sorry, Councillor Lowry, I missed that.
Yeah, it's too late for motions. So.
Okay, so standing order 24, I will extend the meeting by 10 to 15 minutes to get through the formal business, and we will extend the motions we will move the motions to the next meeting. Thank you. So we now move to questions to lead members. Councillor Atkinson, do you wish to, can you ask your question, please?
Well, yes, luckily it's short. Construction of the Caviar luxury care home at Dovehouse Street on the site of Thamesbrook appears to be virtually complete, but the promised replacement council facility at Lots Road has not even broken ground. Why not?
Councillor Kamali, do you wish to answer that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I'll try and keep it short. Councillor Atkinson, you'll be aware that this is a key priority for us in the council. And I must say this is actually a good example of all the various departments within the council working together. It is obviously a council site, but it involves planning and it involves housing as well as adult social care. The site itself is dependent on the SPD, which is under consultation with our residents and due to be adopted in September 2021. This site is just one part of a wider approach for the Lots Road area and the SPD itself. And going on from an October start with early engagement and involvement on the council scheme, we anticipate we should be able to appoint a contractor in late 2022. We're committed as a council to not just engaging, but involving our residents in decisions that affect them and their local area. This inevitably takes longer, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. And this is how we're also, alongside Councillor Taylor Smith, approaching the New Homes programme. You'll see we were going to have a motion on care homes tonight. I think it's an absolutely pressing issue for the council that we do discuss it, and we do have a report written. And this will form one of the backbones of will form the backbone of our care home provision going forwards. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Atkinson, do you wish to ask?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm afraid I do. I mean, I can't blame Councillor Kamali for this because I don't think he was on the council at the time. But the only reason why it was agreed that Thamesbrook was going to be closed was we were given a specific promise that the replacement care home on Lots Road would replace it. We're now what, 3-4 years late, and he hasn't actually answered my question. As I say, the Caviar luxury care home is finished. We haven't even started. And I would like to ask him, does he know that we were given a specific guarantee over this?
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. I do, and judge me on my actions, not on the past. Thank you.
Well, I am doing. It's not started.
I've laid out the timeline for it.
I look forward to debating this with you when we do get to this business properly.
Councillor Atkinson, thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Blakeman, can you ask your question, please? As laid out.
In the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower fire, the Central North West London Mental Health Trust assessed that around 11,000 North Kensington residents have been affected, probably most of them suffering from some form of PTSD. Do you have any more up-to-date figures on the number of local residents currently affected by the fire with physical, mental, medical and mental health issues?
Thank you. Councillor Kamal again, please.
Thank you, Councillor Blakeman. I have got some figures. I'll just read them to you so that you can make notes or review the video later. Obviously, as you know, there were health screenings carried out on 11,000 people to establish the support they needed. As it stands, there are currently 1,049 adults and children receiving support from CNWL, Grenfell Health and the Wellbeing Service, and the NHS Dedicated Service. This is in itself a point-in-time measure rather than a cumulative number, so please do bear that in mind. Between April 2020 and January 21, 1,359 primary care extended appointments were taken up. These both assess physical and emotional health and well-being. Between April 2020 and January 21, 512 primary care and community enhanced health checks were undertaken, which cover a range of mainly physical health checks. You should, as you're no doubt aware, know that this may include some double counting for people that have both received support from CNWL but have also attended an extended appointment. And I think this is a topic that deserves more discussion rather than a hurried point tonight. So I'd be happy to give you a longer written answer on this issue.
Thank you. Councillor Blakeman, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Yes, I would like a longer written answer because, for example, you haven't mentioned the number of people who had to go to St Mary's.
Okay, exactly. As I say, I'll make sure we have a full breakdown of all of that and get it over to you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Niall, do you wish to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Why licensing has stopped continuing with the proactive policy of sending letters to residents in the immediate vicinity of new licensing and variation applications?
Shall I respond?
Councillor Thalasitis, do you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Niall. I actually met with licensing officers and the chair of licensing to talk about similar matters earlier in the year. I know that during the first lockdown, we did write to nearby residents and businesses in the vicinity of new applications as everybody was required to stay at home. I think this was possible partly because the volume of licensing applications was substantially lower than normal, particularly TENS, as no events were going ahead. By August, the number of applications had increased significantly to their previous levels, and due to those factors, the licensing team was typically sending out more than 100 letters per application. Despite that, we didn't actually find a large increase in the engagement that we had from local people. It suggested that the additional implications of capacity and resource were not resulting in higher engagement. And so the team, I think prior to my appointment, halted this process as the new workload would have caused a negative impact on the rest of their functions and processing applications in a timely way. From March to August, the team sent out over 4,500 letters, as well as 2,000 emails to residents and residents associations. The statutory requirement for advertising applications is a notice displayed on site for 28 days and publication in a local newspaper. And in addition, applications open for public consultation are sent out on the daily and weekly email alerts that people can subscribe to and displayed online on our licensing register. I'd like to put my thanks on record to the licensing team who have done a great job at trying to promote our work during the pandemic. We had over 1,100 applications last year, more than 200 complaints, I'm sorry to say, and also over 400 site visits. It's been a huge task, and they've tackled it in a really good, productive, and dedicated way.
Thank you very much. Councillor Niall, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were informed early in April last year about this decision, and taking such a decision to stop sending letters in August without prior notice is a failure of our consultation process and against the Charter of Public Participation. Now we are in lockdown and the shielding will continue until 31st of March. I appreciate the hard work and commitment of licensing officers during these challenging times. I would like to know, please, is there any plan to provide additional resources and support to licensing officers during these difficult times? And is there any plan to carry on with this proactive policy of sending letters to our residents while we are still under lockdown? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Niall. I think on the first point about the resource available to licensing officers, that's something personally I've got a reasonably open mind about. I think there is the potential that alfresco licensing, if it continues beyond the pandemic, will create an indefinite or permanent higher volume of applications to process and a greater volume of things for our team to do, basically. And if that's the case, then we may need to look at it again. So I am retaining a somewhat open mind on that first point. I think on the second, we don't have imminent plans to relaunch letter drops on the scale that you're talking about, but I'm happy to talk to you about ways that we can mitigate that and continue to promote applications across your ward and the borough.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move to item 12, matters of local concern. Does any member wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11 and speak for up to 2 minutes?
Me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bakhtiar, yes, please.
Thank you. Antisocial behaviour is described on the council's website as anything from but is not limited to: first, harassment and intimidation, including racial harassment; two, drug and substance use; three, noisy building work; 4, loud parties; 5, neighbor disputes; 6, vandalism and graffiti; 7, antisocial groups of young people; 8, fly tipping and littering; 9, physical assault and violent behavior. 6 out of 9 of the above points are linked to drug use and its distribution. Our antisocial behavior policy is clearly not working. The high demand on illegal drugs and substances by the end users in the borough and the neighboring boroughs had turned our residents' lives miserable. While we recognize that this is a policing problem due to lack of funding and cuts by the government, we also need to admit that our antisocial behavior policy is not fit for purpose, and it is time to review and fix its weaknesses. We have been talking about this issue for a long time, and in many committees and working groups. Therefore, I would like to ask the relevant departments in the council, especially the community safety and the housing management team, to work closely together to review our policy and come up with practical solutions to this serious problem in consultation with our residents and the stakeholders. And I would like to see an update on this issue, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you.
Would any other member wish to raise an issue under Standing Order 11?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Idris.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is actually not a concern or anything negative. It is something really positive. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Emma Wills for actually taking what was a dream and an idea and making it a reality. Last year, we talked about the B Superhighway, and the year before that, and now it is actually here. And it is real. And thank you so much, Emma, for making it happen. You can find where the mapping is on the council website. And I would like to ask everyone to encourage all the residents, garden squares, and landlords to actually put their mark on that map. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. We've agreed to move the motions over to the next council meeting, so we now move to the final item on the agenda, which is appointments. Item 14, appointments to committees and outside organisations. The appointment sheet has been circulated. I ask Councillor Thalasitis to move the nominations in his name.
I beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
Are those nominations agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I declare it carried.
Did she jump or was she pushed?
Here.
Pushed.
I ask Councillor Thalasitis and Councillor Lowry if there are any other nominations, and if so, any other nominations?
No.
Nothing.
Thank you very much.
Nothing from my end, but nothing from my end.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Milson, excellent.
Thank you. Can I, in closing, can I just bring the notice of members that we are launching a Mayor's raffle and proceeds will go to Glassdoor Homeless Charity. Tickets are now on sale and the Mayor's office will be sending out details, and prizes will be announced at a virtual event for all raffle ticket holders at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 31st of March. Prizes include a week's stay at a beautiful Bodrum Peninsula apartment in Turkey, a signed Chelsea football shirt, 2-night stay in a luxury apartment in London, and much more. So please do support this, buy your tickets and support the work of Glassdoor. Thank you very much indeed. And finally, I'd like to thank our IT team who've supported us tonight, particularly with the vote. I think it went reasonably smoothly, so thank you very much. And I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.